Jeremy Bennett.
Jeremy Bennett.
Welcome to the Iron Sights podcast, brother.
I'm stoked, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm stoked too. This thing came together fairly quickly. So the first thing I got to do is thank you for taking time out of your very busy, kind of crazy schedule transition. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit here to spend time with me. I had a really good time last night. We were able to connect for dinner, learn more about you.
Yeah, have some cigars.
Have a couple
Introduce me to real cigars.
Have a couple cigars, which is it's always good to share good cigars with good dudes. Connected with our local guy, Sergio. He's my brother from another mother from LC Action here in town, who's taken very good care of me over the years. Good dude. And then your friend John, who I was able to meet.
Oh yeah.
From Outrider Training Group, which is your firearms instruction company. There's a lot to unpack here. So I don't want to I'm just kind of trying to give people why is this guy on the show? Because I'm probably, that's what it was like. Okay, so who is this dude? If you don't know who Jeremy Bennett is, you're going to hear about him. But this is what I knew about you before last night. This is pretty much all I knew. One, that you work for the company Glock. I knew that. And then two, that you were just an amazing individual that I should know. And that came from some other amazing individuals. So when I choose to have people on the show, it's generally, more often than not, somebody has recommended a person based on that criteria. It's not all the time, but a lot of the time. And in this case, I was like, well, if this dude's in town and I get an opportunity, we got to meet him and get him on the show. So here you are.
Appreciate it, man. And all the people in that circle spoke very highly of you as well. And I was like, I asked the same question, like, what the hell would I do on a podcast? Nobody wants to hear me. And they said, no, dude, you should do it, man. He's good people. So I've been watching some of the fitness stuff mostly. And I saw the Pronka and Noner interviews. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not Pronka and I'm not Noner.
That's funny. Like I had somebody ask me that the other day. I had my friend Adriana on the show, and she's like, well, I don't know. It's weird that I'm here. Like I don't have the notoriety of these other, and she mentioned kind of the same dudes. And I was like, look, and those dudes would tell you this too. I'm not speaking for them, but I think I know them well enough to say, like, to them, they're like, they don't think that way of themselves. But this shit ain't a contest. It's not a competition on the podcast. I just talk to people that I want to talk to, and because if I think they can bring value to me, and then they can definitely do that for somebody else. And I don't think this one's going to disappoint. So
I hope not.
So you nervous?
A little bit, man.
Yeah, I get that. Most people sitting over there. So let's go back to, a couple of the guys you just said. I don't know about Pronka because he didn't say that to me, but I know Mike did. He's like, man, I'm a little nervous. Yeah. Like to me, that sounds really fucking weird because
that guy to get
really weird because because I have to tell you, nobody was more nervous than me sitting in front of Matt when I sat down with him, and then obviously sit in front of Mike. And they're just dudes, right? Yeah. Just like you, just like me. They're just dudes. So anyhow, this one's about you. Oh, yeah. So, again, there's a lot to unpack here. And I didn't realize there was that much, obviously, because I didn't really know you. But as I talked to you last night, there's so many different things, so many aspects about you that I'm really intrigued by. I learned a lot from you in a short period of time.
Take that.
Yeah.
If I can do that for anybody, then I'm happy.
To me, you come across as a coach's coach, but more than that, and I think you may have even used this word at some point to describe yourself, but it was after I had already sort of understood this about you in the short period of time that I had spent with you at that point. And that you are a student forever.
Yeah, forever, man. If I could if people knew me for one thing, it's just a consummate student. That's what I want to be known for. Is I'm just constantly trying to learn and evaluate and grow from it. So I'll take that. I'm happy with that.
Let's get that mic a little closer to you because you're so for as large a human as you are, you're very soft spoken.
I am.
Which is a little what's the word I'm looking for? Catches you off guard a little bit. So for people that aren't watching this thing, I mean, this dude's like what, about 6'2". I'm gonna guess you're about 260-ish or something like that.
I am about 240 pounds of muscle in a 280-pound body right now. So
you're a large human, and so and to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, you got a headset on, and so people won't see this, but you don't get ears like you have. And what I mean by that is it looks like they've been put through the blender a few times. you're not born like that. Like this happens over time. You earn shit like that. So we're going to talk BJJ today a bit.
Yeah.
And fighting and combatives, because that's something you're very familiar with that I learned about. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. But man, in terms of kind of reeling this back, like again, you and I had a long conversation, but why don't you just give people a picture of who you are? That might sound really weird in terms of talking about your history, but you've done a lot of things as a student, but also as a participant in that learning process that I want to hear a little bit more about. And I think it'll paint a little bit of I guess it'll give people perspective to some of the questions I'll ask you a little bit later. So you get to start and finish wherever you want, dude.
Yeah. So this is always the worst part. Even when I'm doing a shooting class or something, the intro, the background, talking about myself is something I've never really been super comfortable with, but just a desert kid, man. I grew up in Victorville, Hesperia, California, real small towns out in the desert. Grew up shooting a lot. There's not a whole lot to do there. So you either ride dirt bikes or you shoot stuff, and I couldn't afford dirt bikes. So we, grew up shooting quite a bit. Grandpa used to pay us to shoot June beetles and birds out of the garden in the backyard. That's kind of how I got started. So I was always fascinated with it. I was always reading about it and studying about it, reading all the old military books, stuff like that. And then I got the fighting bug. So I started martial arts. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old, doing the free Kung Fu in the park,
Oh, you mean like somebody was offering something like a free community class or something?
Yeah. So it was just, show up at the park, and this guy, Mario, he was teaching Kung Fu, and so I got hooked and did that for a couple years. My older brother did it as well. He got his black belt in it, and after a while he left. So, again, we were pretty poor. So we just travel around to whatever school was open at the time and take the two weeks free, trial for as long as I could till they kicked me out. So, I've got notebooks that I just dug out of the old storage unit that go back to 1990s, where I knew I had 2 weeks to learn as much as I could. So I write it all down and steal as much as I could in that 2 weeks, and that kind of probably inspired the whole, information thief student thing.
I love it.
Oh.
I love how you put that, like being an information thief. Like, what does that mean? Like when you say that, what do you mean by that?
I think part of being a good student or a good instructor is you're just trying to collect up as much information, stealing it from wherever you can. And it's like, no matter what school I would go to, I go, man, this is going to get my ass kicked, but I could take something from it, how not to do it, how to do it, what, just stealing whatever I can from whatever instructor I'm learning from at the time. And that's helped me to get to where I'm at now as far as shooting goes as well, and jiu-jitsu and fighting goes. So just always trying to grasp onto whatever nuggets I can take from an instructor or a video or, whatever.
So we're just talking about applications of these different things. What kind of a student were you in school? I'm curious.
Oh, I was a terrible student. Well, I was a smart enough student that the things that I really enjoyed, history and stuff like that, I did. I was in AP history for years. And then the stuff I wasn't interested in, I just didn't devote any time or effort into. Mm-hmm. So I was a slacker in some classes, and I was a really good student in other parts of it.
So it's interesting, like you mentioned, like the history thing. So I had a long conversation with you last night, sort of about mixed martial arts and BJJ and
Jiu-Jitsu history.
Jiu-Jitsu history. It was mind-blowing. In fact, there's another dude who pulled up a chair because he was overhearing and he was like eavesdropping, and then he tried to jump in because he was fascinated by what you're able to bring to the table. I wonder, was there like any creative in there too? Were you into art, drawing, like creative type of stuff? Was that in there for you?
Yeah. Not a music guy, obviously. Okay. I wasn't a singer. I wasn't a musician, but I could draw a little bit, and I used to draw tattoos, and, we were knucklehead kids. So we draw lowrider cars and stuff. And I was halfway decent. But I was always interested in it,
Yeah. The reason I asked that is just like when I hear you describe things in my talking with you, and I imagine this comes out in your instructing as an instructor, you're very descriptive, but you're able to do it in so many words. It doesn't become word salad, but the points are very easily taken. But it is also, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say it's very eloquent in the way you put it together, almost as if you've said it a million times, even if you haven't. And that's a skill and an art, man. So, I really respect that.
I appreciate that, man. I think reading has a lot to do with it too. I read a lot. I'm constantly got a nose in a book or listening to audiobooks. And I think the more you read, the more you intake, the better it is you are at articulating it. It definitely helps.
I couldn't agree with you more. What are you like? What's the latest? What's on the current audiobook or on your nightstand table or whatever right now?
Shamefully, a lot of fiction lately.
Why do you say shamefully?
Yeah, I try to mix it up. So I'm on the road a lot. I'm traveling for work all the time. So I do a lot of audiobooks, and I'll try to do, I might do 5 audiobooks a month, which is quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I'll try to do like 3 fiction books and then 2 serious books, about psychology or whatever the case is. I don't always hit the 2, smart books, but I read a lot of fiction lately.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, why not? It's entertainment.
It's entertainment. Yeah, I could be listening to the radio, but
could be looking at Instagram or watching YouTube or some other bullshit, man.
I just did you might appreciate this, the Jack Carr's book series. I just did the reread, and he dropped the Red Sky Morning.
I haven't gotten into that one yet.
It's good, man. It's good. Yeah, it's as good as the other books, man. He's really, really great. He's kind of a historian when it comes to, a bibliophile, I guess. He's a book guy too.
So I grew up with a couple different people. There was a guy by the name of James A. Michener who wrote a few books. One of those was called Centennial. And you might really enjoy this. It's very long. It's kind of a saga. There was one called Shogun, which...
James Clavell.
So there was... James Clavell was one of those guys. Sorry, so I'm wrong about Michener and Shogun. There was a different one that's not coming to mind right now. But Michener wrote a book called Centennial. And it was really about the birth of America and kind of how it came together. It was kind of an adventure. And I got into that. So going back to like reading fiction, while it was fiction, right? Like Carr's books, it's very much kind of a history lesson as well as a technical lesson in certain things, which I really respect and really enjoy versus, I don't know, aliens invading the earth or, any of that kind of stuff.
Empty fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. So no, I haven't gotten into it yet. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, I asked you about being a student sort of in school. I understand you have a history from the Marine Corps. When does that happen for you? Can you talk about that?
2003, I went into the Marine Corps. 2003, right after high school. I kind of knew I was going that direction. I got in trouble as a kid. I started getting in trouble hanging out. It was a pretty roughneck area, so we started getting some trouble. I was on probation. I think I was 12 or 13 for fighting, beating on people. And neighbor moved in, and he's just the biggest, toughest dude in the whole area. Real quiet, real stoic guy. And I knew that I had to go somewhere to get out of trouble. And I remember telling him, I'm going to join the Army. He goes, he said something about the Marine Corps. I go, what's the Marine Corps? He goes, oh, you'll never be good enough for the Marine Corps. And that was it, man. After that, I read every book. I prepped. I did everything for it. And I was pretty fortunate that I got in. I got into a car accident when I was 16, and it broke my right leg, I think, in 7 places. So they had to put in a plate and 8 screws.
Damn.
Yeah, it hooked it up pretty good. The bone's sticking out and stuff. So doctors there, they said, hey, you're never going to be able to, walk without a cane probably. So get ready for that, and kind of prepare me for the worst case, I guess. But you don't accept that when you're a kid. And I was 16, 17, so I healed pretty well. And so they put the plate in and healed up and started PTing my ass off, and I was able to get in. And then I was wrestling in high school, and I broke my right hand. I got whooped and punched the mat and broke my fist. Self-inflicted. And then, I come off the mat and the bone's sticking out of my hand. So we taped it up and wrestled another 6 matches. And I think that probably did more damage than anything. So they had to open that up and put a plate in there. So as I was going through the process to get into the Marine Corps, it was like, hey, dude.
That's questionable.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And they go, you can't hide it because you got the big gnarly scars. So I actually had to go, I went and wrestled a little bit at the junior college. I was wrestling in high school. I got my coaches to sign off on it, and I, it's rock climbing. I was doing a bunch of different stuff, and I was able to get people to sign off on it and say, hey, he's in pretty good shape. He should be okay. I probably rushed it a little bit because I ended up re-breaking it in boot camp. And, I was duct taping my leg at night because it would swell up, so that it ended up getting worse and worse. So after boot camp, I had to spend, I think, 4 weeks in the broke guy platoon after that.
Wow.
So, but overall worked out pretty well.
All right, so let's talk about the Marine Corps and your experience there. So you get in, you'd had a little bit of a rough go as a kid. You had to do a little extra work to get there because physically you're a little bit broken getting in there. How's this work out for you? I mean, was the Marine Corps good for you at that age? Did it straighten you out a little bit? Did it give you purpose, direction, the things that the Marine Corps can do? Or did the other things the Marine Corps can do
a little bit of both
and just turn you into a total disaster?
A little bit of both. I had my disaster time. I had my really disciplined time. Actually, it was really good for me in school because I just knew, I read about it and I knew like, hey, you got to stay on the straight and narrow for it. So I really started to get really disciplined in high school and cleaned up my act. Got involved in a youth group as well. That was incredible. And,
cool.
That really helped me straighten out. So when I got into the Marine Corps, I was pretty well prepared, disciplined already. After the time in the injured, broke guy platoon, I went over to, best unit in the United States Marine Corps, the Magnificent Bastards out in San Mateo, 2-4. And at the time, this is kind of right after the first push into OIF in Iraq.
Okay.
And, so we went over, I got there, I think November, checked into the unit and was a new guy, but I was the meritorious Lance, meritorious Lance Corporal. I got a couple meritorious promotions. I was like the honorman coming out of the School of Infantry. And I got there and checked in and they were like, yeah, none of that shit matters here. And, kind of broke me off and it was good. I needed it, but I checked in. I think I checked in around November and by February we were in Ramadi, Iraq. So it was a pretty quick turnaround.
That is very fast.
Yeah. And it, in the beginning of that deployment, it was like, hey, you guys are going to be building schools. Nobody knew how intense it was at the time. And as we were getting ready, they're saying, hey, they're starting to put these bombs in the road, that type of stuff, the IED stuff. But we really had no idea what we were walking into. And it ended up being a pretty intense deployment, 04 Ramadi. And it was an intense one.
And what were
the fire?
Yeah, what were you doing in the Marine Corps? What was the MOS?
I was an infantry guy. So I was a 0351, which is an assaultman. Do some of the demolition stuff, carry the rocket launchers. But there was really no real application for that. So I ended up either carrying, as a kind of an 11 or a machine gunner. They gave me the 240 because I was a pretty big guy. And,
I'm not surprised by this at all. Yeah.
Actually, I was, I think I told you this, but my senior year in high school, I wrestled at 152. I was pretty scrawny.
You did tell me that, yeah.
I was a big, tall, scrawny
I can't imagine you at 150 pounds, man. Not even in high school. Yeah.
I was scrawny, man. I was all arms and traps and, my legs are the same size. They still,
gotcha.
Beanpole legs. But in boot camp, I actually, first time getting 3 square meals a day. And I ended up jumping up to, I think, like 190 pounds almost. And then on that deployment, I went from 190 to 220 something because I would just lift every day, no matter what we were doing. We had a little bootleg gym and I'd go get my lifts in.
Get her done.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a scrawny bastard.
All right. So you spent some time there. How long are you ultimately in the Marine Corps for?
6 years. So I had some broken time. I got out, fought professionally for a while, and then I went back in on the reserve side, did some more time there. And that was when they did the big drawdown. So it was kind of like if you're not, a new guy, unbroken, then they were booting everybody out at that time.
That was my question then is so there's a drawdown, but do you get deployed at any point on the reserve side?
I didn't, no.
Okay.
So I had the Ramadi deployment. That was a pretty intense one. We lost 34 guys killed in there and a lot of wounded guys. So it was a really intense deployment. We went straight from there. We went to Okinawa, Japan. Mm. I tried to stay over and stay with the guys in 2.
Everybody goes to Okinawa, apparently.
Everybody goes to Okinawa. And that's where I discovered I like to drink a lot. That's where I became the train wreck. So I lifted hard. I was still training and fighting and stuff, but did a lot of drinking. Mm-hmm. A lot of drinking in Oki.
Again, like there's the Marine Corps and there's the Marine Corps.
Yeah. One side or the other.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about it except for guys like you telling me about it. But okay. So you mentioned the fight thing, but before we get to that, just I don't know. I'm curious because of how you articulate things. What's the biggest thing you took away from the Marine Corps for yourself as a student?
There's a lot, man. I mean, just structurally, the Marine Corps actually does a really good job of, breaking down, the key learning objectives. Like this is what we want you to take from this, because you have a varying level of intelligence in the Marine Corps. So.
Yep.
The structural development there, like, hey, this is what we're trying to get these guys to understand out of this training evolution. And I'm like, okay, that all makes sense to me. And I still use some of that today. They're actually pretty good about that, especially when it comes to teaching. Mm-hmm. And then again, you get a really wide variety of guys. So I spent about a little bit over a year teaching at the Urban Warfare Training Center in 29 Palms. So I ran the urban assault lane. So basically it was shooting in the sim house or, teaching guys how to move through hallways and structures and clear rooms, that type of stuff. And Marines present some challenges in the way that you have to teach them. I mean, I've met some guys that could be friggin' Rhodes Scholars and some of the dumbest humans I've ever met in the Marine Corps. So you really have to be able to articulate to all of them.
Yeah, I gotcha.
To make sure they know
it. So you're learning skills.
Yeah.
And obviously those skills have carried over into the other things that you've done. So, which we'll talk about. Let's move into the fighting piece. Just you mentioned you'd started as a kid, you'd been exposed to this, you wrestled, you're working out, you're doing your thing, on deployment. Then you go to Okinawa and there's some fighting there. So you get involved in martial arts there as well.
Yeah, a little bit. So, karate's really big there, Kyokushin karate. And at the time I'd grown up, I'd sparred with some karate guys and they were McDojo karate guys.
Yep.
But the Okinawa, Japan karate guys are a different monster.
Not the same.
I mean, I learned a couple hard lessons there. So I learned a lot about, striking and kickboxing there. I also linked up with a friend of mine, Mumar, who's from Thailand, grew up in Thai boxing. And I saw him kick the bags one day. And I'd had some American kickboxing experience.
But it's a whole different animal, man.
Yeah. So I said, look, he wanted to learn wrestling. He wanted to learn jiu-jitsu. I said, dude, I'll teach you everything that I know as long as you teach me how to kick like that. It's about 125 pounds. And I was watching him fold up this 6-foot bag and throw it across the room. And I said, sir, please teach me how to kick like that.
I watched a similar dude walk in the door. He looked like he's about 120 pounds. I don't know how much he weighed, with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and his shirt off, and went in and just put a whooping on a dude, maybe you're my size, who was brand new to the gym in about 2 minutes. And a minute 59 of that was him getting through the rest of his cigarette and getting a little warm up in the corner with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth while I was skipping rope and whatever. When I saw that shit go down, this was very specifically a Thai kickboxing gym, I was like, oh my God, like this is something completely different. And at the time, and maybe we get into this, like the UFC was starting to introduce like mixed martial arts to the world in a different kind of way, right? It'd been around for a long time, but not UFC. And so you're starting to see these different disciplines or whatever. And I knew enough to know that the pound for pound guys in terms of kicking and punching, power and just violence were coming out of Thai kickboxing. Out of Thailand. So again, like it was super impressive to me, and I recognized there was something very different about it. And so you get introduced to this shit, and now it's like, again, being the student, how far down the path do you go?
Man, well, it all kind of started before that for me, especially with kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. The town I come from, Hesperia, has got some just phenomenal, mixed martial artists there. Joe Stevenson's based out of there. Dan Henderson, grew up there. I got to wrestle with his dad a little bit at the junior college. He's just an absolute monster. I mean, when you're 19 and that guy, anyone over 30 looks old, but he's still in there throwing everybody around and washboard abs, so he used to scare the life out of all of us. He actually, I talked to Dan recently, and his dad just passed away.
Wow.
And you start hearing stories from all the guys I've trained with, and nobody's ever had a bad word to say about the guy. He was a great human. So sorry to hear that for Dan, because he's a great guy too. But I was really, I got a chance to be around a lot of those really well-developed martial artists. Again, I was really poor, so I'd show up for a week, steal what I could. I'd go to the Police Athletic League boxing club for a week. I also found out in high school, junior high school, I fell on a skateboard, hit my head, had to get an MRI, and they found a cyst on my brain. So
what?
Yeah, it's called an arachnid cyst. It's just a tiny little bump, but they were so concerned about it before they knew what it was that it was like, stop all. I was done sparring, doing any kind of martial arts. That really put the brakes on it. Wow. So I'd have to hide it from my mom and,
go spar, go to these classes or these 1 week passes undercover. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I kind of hid all that from her as much as I could, But it was good for me because I got to see a bunch of different styles of instruction, a bunch of different styles of martial arts. And, those times it was pretty fresh. It was, kung fu versus kickboxing versus this and that. But there was guys out there like Ted Williams, who trained Joe Stevenson, who, great wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. It was starting to spread at that time. So was pretty lucky. And at that period, I graduated high school in 2002. That was kind of some of the early pinnacle of the UFC and pride fighting and stuff. So I had a foot in that door already.
Okay, so you come out the other side of the Marine Corps, right? And then what? Like, what's that transition like for you?
I actually, it was straight into the fight world. So I was taking fights. I was fighting in smokers wherever I could. I'd fight. I'd go down to, LA area and fight in a smoker. Crew Rex has got to fight here. So, you're just showing up. They look at you. They go, you're about the same weight as him. And
when is this? What years are this?
So I was getting out the first time, 2007. So around 2006,
I might have been in a couple of those, watching as a spectator. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't remember if it was you or not, but there was a few guys go back to that Thai kickboxing experience. That's where that was. Yeah, it was down in Redondo Beach.
Okay, yeah.
So anyway,
yeah. So there was a lot of that, and it was just you'd have to do your job, and especially when I was teaching, it was easy because in the instructor billets, I get a little bit free time after class, and I can go kickbox, and guys hold mitts for me. So I was just taking fights where I could and doing jiu-jitsu tournaments where I could. And as I was getting out, I was kind of debating back and forth about should I stay in, should I get out? And I got a chance linked up with a guy in my hometown. So I was in 29 Palms teaching, and I would just drive the hour and a half back home.
Okay.
Do practice, drive back.
Wow.
Spend the weekends and just get 2 or 3 practices in wherever I could. And started to develop pretty good, took a couple fights that, looked pretty good, knocked a couple guys out. So I started to link up with some of the guys like from Tap Out, Mask and those guys. They drove me, they put me in the bus. Yeah, and it was a big deal back then.
The Tap Out crew, man. I forgot. Oh my God, I forgot all about those dudes, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember, I got to go to UFC with a buddy of mine, and they had the Tap Out bus, and they drove me around. They go, hey, I heard you're pretty good, that type of thing. Meeting Chuck, Chuck Liddell and Tito and all these guys. So I'm really kind of getting pushed in that direction. And, part of my heart wishes I stayed in the Marine Corps, and a part of it was like, hey, you got a real opportunity to become, something in the fight world. So I got out and,
that's what you
straight
did.
Into the fight.
That's what you did. What's that life like?
I wouldn't send my kid in that direction for it's changed quite a bit, but at the time it's, living off of unemployment and, going to practice 2 or 3 times a day, driving all over creation. I got linked up with probably the wrong coach. He turned out to be a giant piece of shit. So
it's common tale, actually.
Yeah. So, I'm taking fights wherever I could, and I'm paying out, 33 1/3% of every purse. And at that time, that purse is $200, $300,
So it just cost you money.
Yeah. Basically paying to fight, But I was just taking where I could, and I got some really good training exposure with really good guys at the time, But yeah, it was kind of it was a train wreck. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're in a hotbed at a very interesting time down there, just in terms of the evolution of like the sport of MMA and all of the worlds colliding. You look at the history of the sport, and Huntington Beach, San Diego, just Orange County, right? Even down into the South Bay, into LA. And then as you moved east, it got even a little different out there. It was the shit was on fire.
Oh yeah.
And everybody was just trying to grab what they could from who they could get it from. Then obviously the spectacle of it all was starting to become very popular. And so that meant a lot of people were coming in, passerbys were like, this is cool, I want to do that. But all along the way, what was happening is people were discovering jiu-jitsu, or BJJ as we know it right now, and how that played in to these world-class fights where I think I was describing this to you last night. Like, I didn't really understand it. I had no experience with BJJ at all. Like what we'd heard was when I was a kid growing up, it was ninjutsu, right? From the old black belt magazines, right? And all that stuff. My dad actually has a black belt in Shotokan.
Oh yeah.
And so as a kid, I played around with that a little bit. My dad's not an instructor or teacher at any level in that sense. So that isn't a thing that I really took very far, but I was familiar with the martial arts, and that's what we heard about. There was no talk of BJJ. And so it was being introduced in this massive kind of public format. But for me, like, I didn't understand it. But after watching what was going on, you recognized, or what you learned is like, This is, I think, what I was saying to you last night. Oh God, like if that guy's on his back and he's comfortable there, the dude on top is probably going to be in big trouble in a second. And then it was like, oh yeah, I start to see that. And then it would be like, oh yeah, dude, don't put your arm there. Like I've seen enough of this to know that is not how you want to put your arm, or like, oh no. You need to be a little bit different, but just there it is. It's over. Yep. Right. It's over.
Half of it, you're like, what just happened?
What just happened?
What the hell just happened?
Yes. So it was a huge amount of discovery. Where are you and BJJ at this point?
So I caught onto it pretty early. So my neighbor had, rented, he had a VHS of one of the early UFC fights, and he puts it in and he goes, they're offering $1,000 for anyone that can beat somebody with the name Gracie. And I go, it's UFC 2 or 3 at the time. So I'm watching it and I'm like, he doesn't look that tough. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
Why is that guy tapping out? He made his arm go straight and it looks weird.
That was weird. I mean, he looked just like this totally unassuming dude, skinny, lanky dude wearing a gi in the octagon.
Like hairy chest popping out. Who's this guy?
How did that dude just do what he just did? Yeah, that's what I mean about the, like, I didn't know enough. I didn't know very much, but I knew enough very quickly to go, that is some shit. And like, if you don't understand what that is and you jump into that ring, you're in big trouble unless you get lucky and that guy lets you knock him out, kind of thing. Anyway, sorry. So back to the question. So you'd heard about the Gracies.
I heard about the Gracies. And then, of course, there's, the Ted Williams gym is in there. So guys like, I remember seeing Boss Rutan drive by and Victor and going, where the fuck is that guy going?
Probably the GOAT. In my mind, he's like the GOAT, man.
Same. Yeah. One of the absolute best and nicest dudes you'll ever meet.
If you're on his good side.
Yeah, if you're on his good side. I still have a dent in my leg from his fucking low kick. But, so jiu-jitsu was actually pretty, wrestling-based jiu-jitsu was pretty big in the area I grew up.
Okay.
So I can remember I went to Ted Williams' gym and Joe Stevenson was there. He was really young at the time. He's a couple years older than me, but this is the first, I'm looking at his ears and I'm like, what's wrong with this motherfucker's ears? What's going on here? So I remember I was screaming at him because I thought he was deaf. He's standing there. I'm like, hey, I want to learn this stuff.
How do you hear with those?
Why are you yelling? I'm like, oh, he's not deaf.
That's funny, man.
And he goes, well, how much do you know about martial arts? And I'm like, oh, I know how to do an armbar. But an armbar from Kung Fu was like they punch at you and you grab their wrist and push them to the ground.
Right.
So I tried it and he was like, let me show you how we do an armbar. And I mean, he threw me, he was pretty gentle about it, threw me down, put me in a straight armbar. And I went, whoa, what the fuck was that?
Taking notes. Yeah.
And I asked about prices and I was like, well, I definitely ain't fucking training here, So that was started like I need to learn this. Like, I had a striking background at that point. This is before I wrestled. So I was like, oh, this is something I actually have to learn this. So I think I told you this yesterday. We had a 99-cent video store called Bernasconi's Video.
That came up. Yep.
Yeah. So there was like a curtain with the adult movies and in the back corner was the old UFC fights. So I would go there and just rent it, pull, change out of the couch and rent it, for $1 and sit down with the notebook and just
awesome,
choke my buddies until I figured out what, how things worked.
I love this.
Yeah, it was pretty cool for me, but I learned a lot of bad techniques that way too, no one there to really correct it. So I had to undo a lot of that too. That's kind of where, it served me in like, you learn something a certain way, you realize there's a better way to do it. I'm not attached to it. I'm used to doing that. Yeah, I learned how to do a triangle choke, but when I learned from a jiu-jitsu guy, he was like, no, do this, this, and this. And I go, okay, well, that way doesn't work. I learned a better way. So I don't tend to attach myself to, the way that I learned. It's a really hard thing to do for people in shooting.
So we're about to transition into that, but it's interesting. I was just having this conversation with this guy, John Valentine, who I really like, and just the way he articulates information. And he's very objective in his approach to explaining things, very articulate, much like you. And one of the things he was talking about was we're not doing jiu-jitsu. We're using jiu-jitsu or BJJ in the sense we're using this martial art, in this particular sense. So not to marry yourself to a particular technique, school, whatever it happens to be, because there's so many things that go into that, and the context changes based on who it is that's in front of you, what martial art they might be using at that particular time. Obviously, there's a lot of things when we're talking about range, distance, and what's involved from weapons or whatever else. I think people are starting to learn that. So you just mentioned that about the shooting thing. I think people are really starting to learn that too. That there's these commonalities, these similarities that exist, but people want to focus on the differences. And those differences come up. This was actually explained to me by this guy, Chris Sizelove. I think actually we talked about him last night. He's out of Blue Force Gear.
Really
good Chris, dude. Yeah. He explained that, we're sort of hardwired to recognize differences as threats versus, and as a student, if that's what you're looking for, the differences, the learning process takes much longer because you end up biasing yourself to one thing over the other. Because you look at this as like, maybe it's because you don't understand it. It's different, I don't understand it. Or it's different, I haven't tried it yet, so I'm not confident in it. And because I lack confidence in it, I will not accept it. I'm not going to do it. Versus the similarities of like, all right, well, this guy's teaching it this way and this guy's teaching it this way. And ultimately, they're coming to a very similar solution. They're kind of saying the same thing. Yeah. But somewhere I got lost in translation and people are caught up in this nuance of being mad at one another for not doing it the same, or like, no, this is my idea versus this is your idea. We kind of talked about this last night is martial arts has been around for a very long time. Nobody's, and I think going back to the dude that you referenced at the beginning with Matt saying on this show, is like, I haven't had an original thought about shooting in over 30 years. Because none of this is new. It's just application and going through the cycles of what's really popular or what isn't, and where guys might be focusing their time or their efforts, so that you may have to focus your time and your efforts to be able to defend against this particular technique that's people are just getting better at. Yep. It's not a new technique.
None of it's new.
Right.
None of it's new.
They just seem to be getting better because they're putting the time and the effort into it. So I say all that to say, just from the student perspective, and it's kind of this transition where we're talking about kind of going into shooting, so many things carry over.
Parallel, yeah.
So many, and in life, too, just with how you're perceiving how the information is coming at you, what the information is, how you process it, and then how do you use it based on your experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, and not be so quick to marry yourself to a particular thing, whatever it is. Sorry, that was a lot of talking, but I found that to be very interesting as you were just walking through it there, and I picked a little bit of this up last night when we were chatting. Let's talk about this. So how long does the fight game go on for?
I got pretty disenfranchised with it pretty quick.
Why? You mentioned you got hooked up with the bad coach. He's a knucklehead, but what else?
Bad coach, what I mean is exceptionally talented guy named Omar. Very, very talented dude. Piece of shit human.
Gotcha.
I mean, as in, he went to jail for touching children type thing. So
it's a piece of shit.
Piece of shit human.
It's black and white.
Yep. Yeah. And, when I started to see that, and especially in the fight game. So there's, 4 or 5 fight gyms in the high desert. You had Thomas Denny's gym, you had Omar's gym, you had Joe Stevenson was in and out at the time. It was almost opposition. Like to the point where I remember fighting some of Thomas's guys in the bar. And so it wasn't like I could just go, oh, I'm leaving this gym because I'm seeing things out of this guy I didn't like. I was kind of tied to it in that way. So it took me longer than it should.
You jumped in,
this
or jumped
is
out.
Pre, finding out that he had, assaulted minor type thing. But I was like, yeah, I don't like the way this guy's doing business. He's not really teaching. For a while he's like handing out a pamphlet and saying, this is what you should do today. And I was like, I'm out. I don't respect this type of teaching. So it was kind of a hard break for me because I invested a lot of time and effort in that gym and some of the other fighters. And they had some really talented, Alex Reyes, Dominic Reyes' brother, Dominic Reyes was going. There were some really talented guys that came out of there, and we invested a lot of time in those guys. We built kind of a really strong community, without the coach. And it was like, man, I didn't want to separate from that. But I was pretty fortunate in that I left there and I went to the Bullet Hole Training Center, which is Craig Buchanan's gym, who's a 9-time world champion kickboxer. And he's just one of the most phenomenal coaches you could ever meet. He's a little rough around the edges, so he's one of those guys that's not going to give, you're a fighter. I don't give a shit. You're going to do the same workout as everybody else. Come in, earn your keep. And after a year, you can start to get some attention. And that's really what I needed at the time. So, Jiu-Jitsu suffered. I wasn't doing a whole lot of Jiu-Jitsu, but I really kind of anchored down in Thai boxing and kickboxing and got to spend a lot of time with, one of the best kickboxers on the planet. And that was good for me. It was good for me, but I started to see the divide in the way that fighters act, behavior.
Okay.
There was a lot of, mohawks and painted toenails.
Okay.
And,
Yep.
it just wasn't my scene, and it was more about the flash than it was the technical portion.
So the culture changes.
Yeah.
And you're not down with that.
That period, 2007, 2008, 2010 timeframe, people really started to, it gained a lot of notoriety.
Yeah, and they got to separate themselves.
Yeah. So it's like any guy that walked in off the street or any guy that had a wrestling background now is like, hey, I can do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to sell more tickets than that guy. So I'm going to paint my toenails and color my hair and I'm going to be loud and brash. And this wasn't my thing. I was a pretty quiet guy still. I wanted to separate myself from fighters. I love fighting. I love martial arts, but I just didn't want to be a fighter.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough to do if you're trying to be a fighter, man. Yeah. I get it. Yeah, there is a sense of like you have to be part of somebody's team, right? Yeah, because those circles they're not very forgiving.
Yeah.
Right? You're either in or you're out. You were mentioning, the hard separation. There's lineages that you don't just jump from one school to another. I learned that pretty early on too. I think that's, things in life too. People have a really tough time walking away. Was it hard to walk away, or were you knew you were done and this was, there
was a couple factors for me. I picked up a couple injuries in the Marine Corps as well. So I re-broke my leg in Ramadi, duct taped it up, went through the rest of that deployment, and it ended up biting me in the ass because at the time I had some opportunities to go to, to the recon community over to MARSOC. I was talking to some of those guys and went and took a course with an MSPF course. I was one of the top shooters in the class, and they said, why don't you just come over here? It's a lot just better. The community's a lot better. I was like, well, yeah, let me start spinning up for it. I'll start running. How much should I be running? They're like 8 miles. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. With duct tape?
It's not gonna hold up, And I started to realize that pipe dream was falling apart pretty quick. It just wasn't gonna happen. So, and I picked up I had some pieces of shrapnel on my back. Not very big ones, really small pieces of metal, but the muscles around it started to really tighten up, and I started to get some misalignment. So I was having a lot of back issues and back pain, and I didn't know what it was. I went and got an X-ray, and the guy's like, you got metal in your back, right? I was like, no, So after a while, it'll start to come out like a little pimple, and a piece of metal will come out, but I just didn't know, that it happened. So there were some injuries that kind of I'd collected along the years. I went through the VA for it, and their answer is to give me pain pills for everything.
I was just having that conversation with another person 10 minutes before you walked through the door today.
Yeah. So, I'm fighting full time, training a couple times a day, and then I get home at night and I'm just in pain, laying in bed. I couldn't sleep. So they started giving me the Vicodin, and it went from take a Vicodin at night to taking 15 a night to taking 20 something at a time. So, I fought. The only loss I have on my record, I was stoned out of my mind. I'd taken 10 plus Vicodin, tramadol. It became an issue, dude. Man. So, and it, I had gotten to a better gym. I was at Joe Stevenson's gym at that time. Just one of the best coaches you could ever ask for. He was, he was going through his, drinking a lot,
his own stuff.
A lot. Yep. Yeah. So the community, just in general, the fight community at that time was like, you fight so that you can go to the after party, so that you can drink, so that you can party.
Yep.
And I knew I had to get out of there. So sobered up and just kind of closed off the fighting thing for a while. And that's when the EP stuff started, when I started taking those jobs. Okay.
So I'd almost forgotten about the EP stuff. So this seems like an easy transition for a dude like you coming from the space that you were in. Did you already know somebody that, that was in this, that made that transition semi-easy for you, at least helped you along? Or was this just like, this feels like the right calling for me? Most guys are bouncing in some bar, some club somewhere. Were you doing that too?
Yeah, I actually started bouncing. I started doing, when I was wrestling at the junior college, we would do these fundraisers and you go work concert security.
I did all that same stuff.
All the same stuff.
Yeah,
so
all the same stuff.
I started bouncing at like 21.
Yeah,
in the
same.
Marine Corps, I would bounce at night. And
3 days after my 21st birthday.
Exactly, man.
I was like, yeah.
So it was a pretty natural thing for me. I understand, it teaches you a lot about human behavior and what to watch for, pre-incident indicators. If you're a student about stuff like that, you're going to see it in the bar and you can really gain a lot.
Yep.
So after the fighting thing was kind of narrowing down, and I ended up taking a fight. I think it was 2013 was my last fight. And I took one after I'd already taken some EP jobs, but I was drinking and the movie Man on Fire came on. And I was sitting in the house drinking and I was like, man, I got to do something. Broke. I was thinking about taking fights that are guys that I shouldn't take a fight with out of shape just because I needed the money. And Man on Fire came on. I go, I could do that. I shoot pretty well. I know how to read people, So I went, Googled bodyguard
where
training
it starts,
school.
man.
And I linked up at a school. It was okay. He went down to Calabasas for 3 days. The school was kind of nonsense. A guy named Dave, I don't remember his last name, but he brought in a guy named Rick Sweeney, who had a really phenomenal training program. And he was doing more of the high threat protection portion. He was teaching about, mapping and planning and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, all right, latch onto this guy. So if I'm paying you $700 to take a course, you're not getting fucking breaks.
Yeah.
I got my notebook out, and anytime you sit down, I'm asking questions.
Latching on, yeah.
So, he sat with me after class, answered a bunch of questions, and he eventually said, hey, man, why don't you come train with me after this? I'm going to put together a thing. So I went and trained with him, and he hired me on to be, I went and trained with him, and then he put together a 19-day security training class.
Okay.
And I went down, took that. I did really well. It's one of the, they had it broken down in tiers. So I was one of the tier 1 students that came out of there, and he kind of hired me right out of the gate. So I started working for Rick at a high threat protection school, which is just, it was phenomenal. He's bringing in all the right guys. That's where John and I actually met. We both went through the program and started teaching there.
Okay.
He was bringing in guys like Guy Kurt, who's a special forces 25-year legend, had, a lot of experience with a bunch of different organizations, 3-letter agencies. So I got to, teach the combatives for this, and I got to be there and teach some of the protection stuff. But really what I was doing was stealing information from all those guys from that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up teaching there for, probably about 10 years off and on. And I was still taking some details. So I would take a lot of work down in Mexico, Colombia, El Salvador, that type of stuff. Did a couple more trips to the Middle East with an anti-trafficking company. Kind of during the ISIS time frame, we went out, and that was a couple interesting trips doing that too. But
what does that mean? What does anti-trafficking mean?
So it was a Christian organization. A buddy of mine reached out and said, hey, I think you guys would be a good fit. They were doing some anti-trafficking work in Haiti. I think they'd done some recoveries of children that had been abducted, kind of thing down there. So I said, yeah, however I can help these guys, I'm in. And at the time, ISIS was kind of moving through, all the way up towards the Mosul area. They said, hey, there's some work for us. We linked up with the Kurdish government. If you want to go, it's not paid, but get on a flight and go. So I said, yeah, I'll be there.
Talking about rescuing kids?
Yeah, that was the original intent. There was a lot. We ended up doing a little bit of that and helping aid in some recoveries. The Yazidi women that were being trafficked in ISIS. Really, when we got there, it was kind of like we ended up working in refugee camps.
This is bigger than we thought it was, kind of thing?
Yeah, it is just hard to get involved in. It costs a lot more. It was really more restrictive than we thought it was going to be.
Okay.
I was pretty fortunate. I had a lot of medical training at that point, so they sent me out to the front lines with the Kurds to just kind of teach them medical classes. Did a little bit of long-range work with those guys. ISIS is dug in on one side, they're dug in on the other, and we're just kind of shooting across the gaps at each other. Yeah, it was a weird time.
To be back there under those circumstances?
Yeah, so it was, in the beginning, we kind of made our way out to the front lines. We were working with some of the Kurdish military, the Peshmerga, and around the same time frame, there was a couple Canadian soft guys who were driving through a Kurdish checkpoint. They started speaking Arabic to the Kurds, and they thought they were ISIS, and they lit the truck up and killed, I think it was 4 of them. So at that time, they said, hey, we want all the Westerners off the front lines.
Yeah.
My buddy Tyler and I were out shooting, and it was a kind of a funny coincidence thing, but basically we were dug in about 2,000 yards away from the ISIS positions. They had a big ISIS flag on a flagpole, and they had some Swedish 50 cal sniper rifles that none of them knew how to use at all. So we were trying to get them dialed in. They were really rough shape, the guns. So we're shooting across this gap, and I probably shot 50 rounds, all misses, at this flagpole, trying to get the gun, get whatever info we could out of it. And a truck pulls up, and they're basically saying like all the Westerners got to go now. Everybody's getting one of them off the front lines. And I said, he go, who are those guys down there? And they said, oh, they call us Tyriki and Shaba, Ghosts in the Darkness. So it's a weird thing. They nicknamed us. Of course, I was Darkness, but I shoot across this gap and it hits the flagpole and knocks this ISIS flag down.
Does everybody burst into
everyone's screaming and cheering? And they go, oh, those guys can stay. Those guys can stay. So we stayed there for a couple months with the Kurds, and we got to teach a lot of medical classes, some shooting classes and stuff to those guys. Had a couple little run-ins with some of the ISIS chuckleheads, but it was a good learning experience as well.
Wow.
Not a whole lot of anti-trafficking stuff that we could do at the time. Really, we'd get money, pay some of the local guys to drive into Mosul, pay for young ladies, bring them out and put them in a recovery program.
Got you.
It was kind of what we were doing at that point.
Wow. Wow.
It was an interesting trip, man.
I can't imagine. Yeah. That's a lot. All right. So
I have a tendency to buzz through that stuff pretty quick. So
this is like, I'm trying to take it all in. That was sort of going back to our conversation last night and saving some stuff for today. Like I didn't see that coming. I knew there was some EP work, but like a lot of the guys that I talked with in EP, it's not that kind of EP. It's a totally different thing. I wouldn't even, that's not, if you described to me what you did without saying the word EP, I would have not said that it was EP. I would have said, this is quote unquote, air quotes here, contract work, which is what you're doing. But
it was mixed in with EP. So at the time, I spent some time working for Brittany and their security. They had a really good team of security guards at the time, or EP agents, close protection guys. So I got to spend some time on a really high level detail doing that. Miley, details like that. And I really just don't like LA or that. Not to say, they were all actually really nice. Brittany was a super sweet lady. I just didn't like being in LA and being around that crowd. It wasn't my thing. So I wanted to take some time overseas, and I kind of focused on South America for the protection stuff after that. Gotcha.
All right. Roger that. All right. So talk about the transition out of that. So you've been an instructor, you've been a teacher, right? Or an instructor, and then you go and I guess actively also doing the job. I think, my conversations with most folks that have done that type of work is, you're on the clock. Like the realities of the job probably show up pretty fast in terms of the strain and that it takes on your life, on your health, and all those things. And obviously, like, depending on the intensity of the situation, like, how many lives or how many, like a cat, how many, the longer you're in it, the higher propensity for bad things to happen. And you start to realize that from near misses or somebody just being an idiot, that you didn't have any control over. And all of a sudden, like, dude, that was close. That's dumb for how much money I'm making and how much time am I not at home and all that. Is that what happened with the transition or how'd that work out?
Really the transition out of teaching. So, I spent more time teaching than I did doing the EP stuff. That was kind of supplementary. So it was good for me because I got to learn from some really great guys, steal a lot of information and teach a lot, teaching pistol, rifle, CQ, all that stuff. I had a little girl and that changes everything.
Yep.
She's 8 now, but that changed everything. Where I wanted to be, how I wanted to spend time. And it was just harder and harder to be away at that point. Mm-hmm. I needed to spend more time at home. I needed to take less risks. I was still, working in El Salvador, Colombia, that type of thing. And it's probably time to slow down. So I was really blessed. John actually left the company before I did.
Is your partner? Is your partner at Outrider? Yep.
Yeah. So he got an opportunity to go try out at Glock as one of the firearms instructors. He made it on. He's a phenomenal shooter. We'll get out on the range sometimes and shoot him. But,
I love that. Yeah.
He made it on as an instructor. About 6 months later, I got my chance to interview. They called. They said, "Hey, do you want to come out and shoot?" First thing you do, I'd show up in a button-down shirt, and they said, "Go put your gun belt on, dude."
So let's walk through this process. So when they say like you're getting an opportunity, what is I'm intrigued by this. Like, again, without getting too deep into the company and your job with them and those kind of things, but like going to work for a large corporation like this, right? What is that like? What's the process like? So you just said you showed up in a sort of shirt, suit and tie kind of thing, like you may have done an EP a few times. They're like, no, you're here to shoot, dude.
Yeah, you're shooting first. We're going to interview you afterwards, but it's like, if you don't shoot well enough, you're not.
Why even waste our time? Yeah.
And there wasn't a shortage of people that are trying to get on with Glock.
How many were there when you showed up?
It was just me
you. Gotcha.
that day, which is a gift and a curse.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that could be nerve-wracking. Like, nobody's going to be worse than you or better than you today.
There's a lot of pressure.
just
a couple, really good shooters that are staring at you and going, all right,
let's see what you got.
Hit the timer, So I was really fortunate in that my boss, Kurt, at the old place, knew the boss, the director of training at Glock now, who's just phenomenal human. Willie Parent, he's a former MARSOC, former recon guy, one of the best shooters on the team. He's an old man and he's still one of the best guys out there. Yeah. You're gonna love me saying that. But so my name got thrown in the hat. He called me and said, hey, they asked me, got kind of a phone interview type thing. They said, okay, if you want to come out, we'll have you come out and shoot, do an interview. And if you come on, then, we'll move on from there. So they flew me out to Georgia. I spent a couple weeks shooting, John was already at the company. So he kind of gave me a brief, like, these are the type of things they're going to ask you to do, the time frames that you're going to have to do it. And I was like, I shot it a couple of times and went, oh yeah, I'll crush these times. And he goes, okay, well, you're shooting everything from level 3 retention, right? And I was like,
okay,
what the fuck is a level 3 retention?
Were you shooting at like a comp holster and stuff?
Yeah, I was shooting out of my open top, old work holster. And because, majority of the classes were t-shirts for law enforcement. So if one guy's got a holster that's more difficult than everyone else, as the instructor, that's what you're wearing. You're going to shoot it. So everything that they shoot at Glock is from level 3 retention. And so I went, oh, shit. I shot it again and went, oh, man, I got some work to do. Fortunately, I had probably 4 or 5 days. So I just wore the holster.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah. Yeah. I went up and drove to Vegas, picked up the holster from John. I might have had a week, and I just wore it all day and just worked on, defeating the retention on it. And flew me out. I went out and shot for him. I shot well enough to get hired, but not that well. Basically, boss stood there with a timer and said, hey, no pressure, man. There's no pressure.
Oh, right.
You're just shooting for a job at Glock. Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep. And I was like, holy shit. But it does put a lot of pressure on you. It's going to show whether or not you can shoot or not.
I love that. I mean,
yeah, it's the right way to do it.
That's what I was just going to say. Is there a different way that this should be done in your opinion? And
no, I mean,
right.
I didn't know. I wasn't ready for it. We've had a couple openings. I've sent a couple guys in, and guys that I knew could shoot, and it got them. It got them. They didn't make it through. So it is a pretty good, difficult. They have very high standards.
Well, plus you're under the pressure of you're being evaluated, scrutinized, and whatever else. But I mean, you've done that before. You've been on the mat. You've been in the ring. All that kind of stuff before. So I imagine, it's nerve-wracking for everybody, but you're maybe built a little different than some of these other guys in that sense. I mean, that's just me saying that.
Well, at that time, I needed the job. The company was kind of folding up that I was working for. A lot of the guys had left. The company's starting to break apart a little bit. And I was like, man, I didn't know this at the time, but the company is phenomenal. Glock is one of the best places you could ever work. I mean, the insurance, the benefits, they really take care of people. I mean, that's from the janitors all the way up. They take great care of them. So I started to learn about all this stuff, and I'm going, man, I need this job.
Yeah, this is.
I got a 3-year-old, and I need a way out. I was about to start taking fights. I didn't know what to do. So it was important to me. It was that important. And I went out, I shot well enough. They have you teach a little bit. They kind of, do an interview, figure you out. And they said, yeah, hey, if you want to come in, they flew me home, flew me back out, and then you'll spend a couple weeks working in warranty to really learn the gun. And just, you've got to know it up, down, backwards, because there's some guys out there with a lot of Glock knowledge, and you just got to know more than them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was good. And again, I could be a nerd.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was just going to call you that. I was going to say, well, you're a nerd, so this should not have been that big a deal, except for the pressure to learn it, right?
Yeah, so, stay there for a while, learn about the company, you learn about the gun, and then they'll kind of bring you back, and you'll start hitting the road with some of the other instructors, watch the way that they teach, and then eventually they cut you loose, and you're teaching on your own.
Shadowing process and whatever. Yeah.
Left seat, right seat type thing.
And where does that lead you? That leads you back to California?
Yeah, so originally my territory where I was, it's more of a regional thing. You kind of, you're responsible for these areas. John was in Nevada, so at the time I was teaching in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. We hired a guy in Texas, so now it's shifted to where I was doing California.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. It is. So
jump from the frying pan into the fire with the travel, man.
Yeah, and the thing about California people don't understand is, the very restrictive gun laws, the way that
they get that.
Yeah, people know that.
But they don't fully understand. When I travel, people ask me, so dude, what's it actually like out there? And I go, dude, how far do you want to go down this path? Because you're going to get a headache, know? Yeah. And so I try to explain kind of the top line stuff. But so when you say people understand, or there's, California gun laws are restrictive, it's fucking ridiculous. I couldn't imagine how tough it is for you guys to operate around all of that, like being in California, even being in California this week. And then going to, I don't know, a free state, like Texas the next day.
But what's interesting about it is, man, California is full of shooters. Yep. There are a lot of gun owners. There's a lot of shooters. There's a lot of ranges. I mean, part of the reason that Glock still makes Gen 3 pistols is because Californians buy so many guns. Obviously, they can't buy Gen 4 or Gen 5s, but...
Whole nother story.
That's
another podcast. I tried to do that. I did that podcast with somebody once, and it was very enlightening for a lot of people. Like, dude, I had no idea. Like, just gun sales in California and what that whole process is like. But the roster, all that stuff.
I messaged, I called a buddy and I messaged a couple of people, said, hey, I think I'm going to go on this podcast, and they were like, try not to talk too much about the state because of the way I'll sometimes get a little bit.
You and me both. I promise we won't go there, out of respect for your employer.
I appreciate that. California can suck it.
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah.
I'll leave it at that, but that's about the nicest way I could say it. But it seems like in light of some of the recent Supreme Court decisions, things could be changing pretty rapidly.
Look, I think you have to be positive about that stuff. I mean, it's been a long time. It'll be a lot longer probably. But look, the decisions are starting to come down like where we needed them to get to. They needed to get there. And people needed to be faced with making a decision, that being the Supreme Court. And when that happens, like people can fight back. But once that decision is made, now we're in the power position with regard to we'll do what we want to do until you come up with some stupid legislation that may get in the way. But then you have to prove that legislation supersedes what the Supreme Court said. So we don't have to play by your rules, right? Because the Supreme Court said this.
Yeah, they set a precedence. And eventually you can put in whatever roadblocks you want, but eventually you're going to have to understand that these are constitutional rights.
And it's frustrating as hell, but it gives me hope and faith in the judicial system. Not in the legislative, but in the judicial system, that they're doing the right thing. And as long that's the whole again on my soapbox here, but that is the whole purpose of how our government and how our system is set up with the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branch. There has to be checks and balances, and you might have these two knuckleheads here doing all kinds of wacky shit, particularly here in California, how that influences everybody else. But as long as you have one that is not in agreement, right? As long as you get that 33% to go, nope, that ain't going to fly, we're in good shape. So I know people, a lot of very bitter, and they may feel disenfranchised. You used that word before. And I have at times, certainly felt that at times, but more than ever, I'm like really hopeful about this. It's coming. So anyway, circling back, there's a little bit of a tangent. California sucks, but you're operating here and you're doing different stuff. And anyways, so coming into the region and traveling all over, how's that experience for you?
Man, it's awesome. So before working for Glock, I had been to 26 countries, I think, and like 3 states. So I haven't seen much of the United States at all. So now it's been about 6 years in the instructor staff, and I've seen almost every state. I think North Dakota I haven't been to. In West Virginia. I've been all over the United States, and I'm so in love with the United States, man. I've had, I love that. All over, everywhere I've go has just been received very well. People are, you see the assholes, you see the way things are going in certain places, but overall, I haven't been anywhere where I didn't just feel like I love this place,
I do know it's interesting. So my daughter's 22. She just came back from a 32-day. I'm super proud of her. It was a self-funded trip. She'd been putting it together for about the last year and a half. Went to Europe, toured like 6 or 7 countries that she hadn't been to already. She's already been over there a few times with her mom or whatever, but she went over there with the buddy. They traveled all over, did a bunch of stuff, and she was looking at the historic, places. She was going to the the art museum. She was going to, some of the cultural exhibits and things like that. That's what she was into. So proud of her. She's not over there fucking drinking, partying and drinking or whatever. Yeah. In fact, the exact opposite of that. Interestingly, she ran into 2 of her friends that she used to play soccer with in really? Junior high and high school while they were there. Like those girls were graduating college or they're getting their masters or whatever, and they were over there vacationing, and through whatever Instagram or whatever freaking social media thing, they recognized they were in the same place at the same time.
That's cool.
Like one was like in Czech, and I think the other one was like in, I think it was like Poland or Switzerland. It was random. Anyways, the point of this is she's a free spirit, but she's also super independent. She recognizes right from wrong and all that stuff. And she went over there and she got treated in a certain way a few times because she's American.
Yeah.
And sounds that way, looks that way, that kind of thing. And she came back and was very appreciative of being back, in America.
I think it's important. I wish that we could send every, young teenage 20-year-old out to just experience some of the rest of the world and realize like, yeah, we got our problems, man, but
best country in the world.
Best country.
And here's a guy who has not spent a lot of time outside this country. I don't fucking need to, man.
Yeah.
I don't need to know that. I don't need to do that to know. Like I have plenty of friends, plenty of family members, and you don't have to. If you read some books, you pay fucking attention. Like I don't need to know that. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Because if it wasn't, why the fuck is everybody trying to come here?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Whole nother topic. Again, California.
Yeah, California. I don't know what to do with that.
But anyways, it gives you an opportunity to travel. I had a similar opportunity with a big company that I work for, and gave me some really great experiences. It actually made me really appreciate California, if I'm being honest. In a lot of cases, seeing some things that, some struggles that people had, or some things that they didn't have access or availability to, and coming back. So I get that. Yeah, it's cool.
Knock on California some more, but geographically, it's the best.
Can't beat it.
You can't beat it. I mean, you can be in the mountains, on the beach. You can be. Yeah. It's incredible. There's some laws that are complete dog shit, bullshit. There's some leadership that's complete dog shit, bullshit. But the other thing that I've kind of come to realize about California is how hard people are fighting to retain their rights. Or
Thanks for saying that.
Get it, man. I mean, you look at organizations like California Rifle and Pistol Association, all these organizations, and if you're a gun guy and you're not,
supporting,
tithing and supporting to them, you really should think about it, because a lot of these big wins that we've been getting lately are inspired by the guys like that.
And there's not a lot. These are not huge corporations or huge institutions. This is a fairly small group of people, as compared to the people that are opposed to this, that are doing very hard work. I'm glad you brought that up, man. I appreciate that, because again, in my travels, and people go, so dude, what's really like? Place is fucking wacky. Yeah, it is wacky in a lot of ways, but also to your point, like, it's full of great shooters. The culture here is strong. Yep. You got fighters here. What I mean by that is people that are very staunchly, fighting for, to maintain and get back the things that have been taken from them. That's America. So California is still America, and I try to remind people of that. Just like, hey man, like I get it, but it's still fucking America. Yeah. Like, and if we start giving up pieces of it,
exactly.
It's the same thing that happens with California influencing other places. You think that whatever happens in California stays in California? Ask Oregon.
Ask Texas.
Ask Washington. Ask Texas. Ask Idaho. And you can blame California all you want, It's, but here's the thing. It's America. Yeah. And so anyhow, again, I'll get off that soapbox.
But it's important too. Like, people are holding the line and people are fighting their ass off too.
100%.
We were really in danger of going off the other direction. And I think that, a lot of good patriots in California really had to put their foot down, hold the line in order to get things going back in the other direction. And we are going back in the other direction. So I know it's hard to be in California right now, but for those of you Californians that are thinking about bailing out, I get it, but if you can hold the line, man, we're changing it for the better.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And speaking of those that are fighting and dealing with different things and it being very tough, you already mentioned like a lot of what you do from instruction perspective happens for law enforcement, right? So you're trying to help people that are trying to hold the line and being faced with all kinds of different things as it pertains to the law changing and so forth and whatever else. I wonder what that was like for you. kind of transitioning into that, coming from the world that you came from, how you might have been received, how you received it, kind of walking into all of a sudden now I'm teaching law enforcement who goes from, fighting, right? Or Marine Corps, serving your country, right? The fighting that started, early, but then continues on, then moving into EP where you're traveling across the world again or around parts of the world again, to then coming back, being local and working with local law enforcement. Was that easy? Was it hard? Was it natural? Was there any challenges?
It was different. I guess, from the outside perspective, you always have a different perspective of what they're doing. And in the beginning, you kind of think, yeah, these guys are carrying guns around every day. They should all be really proficient. They should all be well trained. And then you get to shoot with them. And I'm like, in the beginning, I kind of had a really harsh outlook on it. Like, hey, dude, you're carrying that thing around today and you shoot like that. Like, I'm counting on you. My kid's counting on you. Like, you should be putting in more work. It's taken me quite a long time to realize the breadth of their responsibility. Like, yeah, he's carrying a gun every day, but he's also doing this and this and this and this, and he's responsible for this, a lot on his plate. This and this. There's just so much on their plate, and sometimes the training gets pushed to the back burner. But there's no excuse. I mean, you're toting a big iron around every day. You should be proficient with it, and whether or not there's too much on your plate, it doesn't take that much to become more proficient or to sustain yourself at a high level. You really just, and part of what I've tried to do in teaching is inspire that in people. Say, dude, look, if you just put in the work, you'll be proficient. It's a different community. They train differently. It was a big change for me because I guess when at the company I was at, you're going to shoot your CTEs, your task evaluations. And if you're shooting a 21-second overall for, 2 months ago, and all of a sudden you're shooting at 26, it's like, hey, homie, like, what happened, dude? Yep. There's a lot of pressure from the outside because they expect proficiency. And a lot of those communities will be the same way. Law enforcement, it was different because I've met some absolute shooters in law enforcement, obviously. And I've met some guys and it's like, oh man, you know what you just did. You know what you did. You want to roll up a newspaper and smack them like, hey man, look what you just did out there. Be a
professional.
Be a professional, man. And I try to be very forgiving about it because I don't really, to this day, I don't really understand the full breadth of their responsibilities. But at the same time, man,
you understand that part of it.
Yeah. You
understand that part.
Both sides of it, I know what it's, I know what it's like on the shooting end and on the being shot at end. And I understand that, but man, there's no excuses. And when I was in a class teaching in Arizona when what was the shooting in Texas that was just an absolute train wreck?
Uvalde.
When that shooting happened. And we're getting information. And I can remember just thinking like, motherfucker, man.
Right.
My kid counts on you like that. And, my hands are tied.
I think we all felt like that, man.
Everybody feels that way. Even the cops that were in that class are just like, man, So I kind of, got back to teaching and I was like, hey man, I'm 6.5 hours away from my kid right now. And I'm counting on you. And every other parent in the United States, if I could get one message out to those guys, every parent in the United States is counting on somebody like you to show up and make that problem stop because it doesn't go away on its own.
Yeah. So you mentioned Uvalde, and a good friend of mine, Mark Smith, he's out on the East Coast, talks about the weight of the gun. You're carrying one of those things, whether you're shoving it in the front of your pants or, you're law enforcement and you're carrying it on your hip, a few feet or 1.5 feet below your badge. You have a responsibility there. And you mentioned, you being hours away from home, I think was the first thing that probably went through everybody's head. It's like, I'm depending on somebody else to provide the safety. I've farmed it out. To somebody else to keep my kids safe. And I've met that principal at that school or that vice principal, and I know that teacher, and what the hell? Like the whole thought of that, the reality of that, like we send them to this place every day. We hope that they're safe, right? And we hope that they're learning and they're again, the word safe being a sort of a broad term, but when it comes to physical safety in that sense, I think we all felt that. And, one of the other things that I heard him say was, if you're going to pull that thing out, or if you're running into a situation, In this case, they weren't running. We're talking about this one.
Loitering.
To say, I mean, it was awful. And I don't know if you know this, like I think the sheriff or the police chief and the guy that was on scene have been indicted. So
bad.
Yeah, it's that bad. I don't know how I feel about all that. I really don't, as it relates to cowardice or, things. I don't. I'm still processing, I think, but I know what I saw isn't right.
Yeah.
And I think here's the thing at the end of the day with like those two guys and maybe several others, and I'm not going to point fingers. I don't think it's smart to do that, but you have a debt now. You have a debt that is owed to those people. And, as Mark had put it, it's like, I'm not sure how you're going to repay that, man. Like, how are you going to repay that?
There is none. I just don't see the way that.
So going back to the responsibility and the weight of the gun and, these officers that you're training and seeing some real shooters and some people that really put the time or the effort into, call it doing the right thing in terms of understanding the tool and being very good with the tool amongst all the other things that they have to balance in life, family, right?
Yeah.
The job, understanding the law, defensive driving, offensive driving, all those kinds of things. Like that one thing, in terms of how much that takes up in the pie chart of things that you have to do has to be pretty large. And I wonder, when you go to these things, is that something you share with them? Or is it only come up when you see the person that's not doing well? Or, is there like a common speech that everybody's heard, Jay say?
I kind of do it, it probably started a little bit before the Uvalde thing, but I'll talk about certain parts. If I'm teaching an armorer's course, it's like, how does this gun work? How do we keep it working? What are the parts? What do they do? And Glock really is like really good about making sure everyone understands the system and why it works the way that it does. But I'll sneak it in there too, and I'll sneak it in. And there's a portion where I talk about training really briefly. And I'm like, look, man, you don't have to go to a class every weekend to evolve as a shooter. You just have to focus and put dedicated time into it. If that means you spend 10 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, dry firing in the garage, that will take you from an average shooter to above average in a very short period of time. It's all about the amount of effort that you put into it. And I tell them, like, look, man, I'm 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours away from my kid, and I'm counting on somebody like you to show up. And if you're going to put that gun on and not be proficient with it, you should probably rethink this position. Because I know you got a lot of shit to do, but when things go sideways, your biggest tool to solve problems is right there on your hip. If you're not proficient with it, you're not helping anybody.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's being delivered by you. I'm just going to say this. So I have not stood there in a class of yours and heard you deliver this message to a bunch of other people. But I can imagine, I think hearing it in the way that you're putting it, again, your stature, soft-spoken, I don't know. I feel like it might resonate with people differently hearing you say it. And after spending a day, I have no idea what it's like to go through a class with you, but I'm intrigued and I would love to.
I got you. Well,
I would love to. But my point being is, I think that message gets talked about, but I don't know, going back to the weight of the gun, how much weight it actually carries, and sometimes more specifically in the delivery process. And again, who is it coming from?
Yeah.
That's weird to me to kind of, I guess get into, like, how much it's more serious coming from this guy than it is coming from this guy when it's the same message, in a sense. But where's the sincerity? What's the difference? But when you put it into the personal context there, and
I found that it took me a while to get there, because there was a time where I wanted to be like, hey, motherfuckers, you need to be training. There's
a time and place for that, probably, right?
Yeah, but it didn't resonate the same way. Like, if I've got a class of 35 guys and I tell them, like, hey, man, and throughout the course, 8 hours, I'll say, oh, I'm a dad, single dad, I've got the best kid that ever lived, that type of thing. And then at the end of it, and most of my class was stand-up comedy. Like, it's going to be fun. We're going to be laughing the whole time, but I'm going to make sure that you understand how important this is, because it's not just me, man. You're in San Jose, like, everybody, when somebody starts shooting up the red line or whatever the bus station shooting, like, it's you guys, man. It comes down to you guys. Everybody that was on the bus that day, everybody that's in the terminal, everybody that's at the school, they're counting on you.
So are their families.
Yeah, and their families. And if you don't want to bear that responsibly, you should probably think about changing careers, because as unlikely as it sometimes seems, it could be anywhere at any time.
That's a solid message. I think a lot of people feel that, maybe have heard that before, but just, I think in delivery of the message and who you're talking to and who it's coming from, there's when you start to connect the dots a little bit deeper and you really talk about it rather than say it, right, and have a conversation about it. I think it means more, and I think more people are hearing it. I don't know how many people are actually absorbing that. And I also, going back to the to the part about training and where do you put it in, and sometimes it takes a back seat and whatever. I think part of the thing that I think is really being talked about, and I think it's a good thing, is that you can't make your training somebody else's responsibility. That is your responsibility. So if you're not going to get it for whatever reason, maybe your Department X doesn't do as good a job as Department Y, and for whatever budgets and all that stuff, you have to take responsibility for that amongst all the other things that you have to do. And to your point, there are no excuses, so figure it out. There's a lot of resources out there. A lot of resources. Read a book, right? How many books has Ben Steger put out on shooting and even dry fire? I don't know if he's got a dry fire, but he probably does.
YouTube. I mean, you can really abuse YouTube. But go watch JBS. Go watch a couple of his videos. If you don't learn something, it's because you didn't try to.
Mark just put out I love Mark, but Mark JBS, he just put out a dry fire video the other day, and he's not everybody's flavor, and he knows that, right? But what he does do a really good job at, again, going back to all the resources that exist, that shit's free, and it was really good information. And he took some complex things and he uncomplicated them. So your learning style, how you prefer to learn, you want it in a 3-minute or a 30-second, Instagram clip. That's how you prefer to consume your information, or that's all you're going to commit to. Well, then that's a fucking great resource, right? And now you got to do the thing, right?
You got to commit it.
You got to do the thing.
It's like watching a fitness video and knowing, like, I watched a couple of years the other day when it was like the 5 keys for, a workout in a short span of time, or whatever it is. And that day I had a short time and I was like, I could get a lift in the morning, but it was like, no, dude, you know the information. Now you got to do the hard work and put the effort in.
So I wonder if you run here, I think you said 6 years as an instructor.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you revisited the same places and the same people a few times in that amount of time. What's the reality of people actually doing the work that you're telling them to do and coming back better? I mean, I don't know if you can put like a percentage on it or whatever, but I wonder how many people take that stuff and because you've done so many reps and had so many revisits, and I don't think a lot of people maybe get that kind of experience, particularly in that genre. Like you've got your range staff, right? And they have a lot of things to do, right? They're trying to get people qualified with different things and, get red dots on their guns, for God's sakes, right? That's a huge undertaking still, that kind of thing. And then you have these other instructors that are out there teaching both open enrollment and law enforcement stuff, and they're kind of popping around. There's only one of them, and they have to do the business and market the business and everything else. Whereas your job is to show up and train the class, right?
Clock's not hurting for customers.
Right.
So,
that's my point. So you get a lot of repetition with the same people even. Yeah. So I wonder how you've seen that, how this has progressed or not progressed.
Like for, our certifications for the Armor's course, it's like a 3-year period. So after like 2 years, I started to get some of the repeat students, and I was actually like pleasantly surprised. And, and a guy will stop you. And for me, it's a lot of faces, a lot of faces that I'm pretty good with faces, and I'll see them and be like, hey, we had a class together, and they come up and shake your hand. And they go, hey man, that thing you told me about my grip and in this class, man, that really helped me in shooting. I'm still working on it. And I'm like, that is the most gratifying thing that you could, as an instructor, because I get a lot of repeat customers, and it's like, dude, the paychecks, right. Glock pays really well. They take really good care of me, but that's why I'm still doing it. Yeah. It's a lot of travel. Sometimes it gets really hard, but it's like, man, if I can have a little bit of influence, work for a great company, and then get to see it. And there was, I was actually talking to the guys at the range here today, and I asked about one of the guys that came through the course, and he's a pipe hitter, man. He's training hard. He's out there getting it. He sent me videos of him going to outside classes, and he just had a shooting here recently. And I asked about him, and John was like, have you seen the video of his OIS? And I'm like, shit, because I think there was 2 officers that were hit here recently, right? Mm-hmm. Shot.
Yep.
Something, oh shit. I see one of those guys, no. And so he showed me the video, and he shot well, did well, did what he was supposed to, communicated well. And it's like, cool. I've had
it got
guys,
through.
Yeah, it got through. But he's a guy that's going to train no matter what. He's a stud. He's in great shape. He puts the gun on, takes it serious. He's that guy.
It's a good day for the good guys, bad day for the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did a class in New Mexico, up in Espanola, New Mexico. I remember this because a buddy of mine that had taught there called me and said, "Hey, dude, you shooting a class in Espanola?" I said, "Yeah, man." He goes, "Those boys are shooters, man. You better be on your shit." So like, all right, I'll get a little more extra range time, and went out and shot with those guys, and I was impressed, man. Those guys, probably to this day, one of the best classes I've had where everyone shot well.
What's the secret sauce? I mean, what are they doing that's different?
It's a really active area, right outside Albuquerque. It's a very, high crime area.
Okay.
So they're working, but it was more in the culture. It was important to them. They were dedicated to
there it
is
is.
At the time,
There it is.
We had a new guy. So most of the guys were pretty well-established shooters. They've been there a long time. We had one guy we called Goof Troop. He's a real tall, lanky guy, good student, but he was a really new shooter, really new to the department, really new shooter. Spent a lot of extra time. I was fortunate. He asked a lot of questions. He trained really well. Spent some time with him after class, that type of thing. And I got a call from my buddy there maybe a year or two later. And he go, "Hey man, check in on Goof Troop." I'm like, what happened? And he had his shooting. Gave him a call, and he's like, "Man, it worked. Everything went really well." I don't remember the exact. I think somebody was trying to hit him with the car, type thing. And he put the rounds exactly where he needed to do. He shot well. He was under control. And he's like, "Well, thank you." And I'm like, "Dude, I can't pull the trigger for you. You put the time in and got to that point." But it's really gratifying for me to get that call and say, "Yeah, this guy did what he was supposed to." And it's like, well, it's not me that did it, but just to be a part of that and go, "Yeah, I trained with that guy."
It's not the first time I've heard that from an instructor before. I mean, again, going back to like paychecks and, what the meaningful shit is along the way, and how do you know if you're making a difference or not? Exactly. I mean, that shit will get you a ton of mileage, right? And just okay, I could do this another couple years.
I could do it you're sitting in a hotel room and whatever the town is going like, "Oh, dude, I got to get up at 6 and go do this." And then you get a call like that and you're like, "Yeah, man, fired up."
And maybe you get lucky early in your instruction career where that happens right up front. You always have that to think about, as a driver or motivator, if you will. When you're on that road eating that horrible food, or in that airport, delayed, or whatever.
Walking past the gym and pretending I didn't see it.
Right, whatever. But, sometimes it takes those reps, it takes that time, it takes those revisits to hear, or to see the fruits of your labor. I love that. But you just said something there about when I asked about like the New Mexico guys or the New Mexico team. And the thing I said, "What's the secret?" You said, "It's the culture." It's the culture. And I think that's the bigger thing. Like, it's not, let's be honest. Like, I don't know. And I know it's different from one to the next because I talk to a lot of people that work. You just mentioned John's one of them. A couple guys in Arizona, a guy by the name of Chris Palmer, who most people are fairly familiar with, and another guy named James Daravan, and they're probably not very familiar with him, but he's in the neighboring city, and does the same job as Chris. And what I've learned from those guys is that, look, they are shooters, in their jobs, and the shooting has to be there, right? The instruction has to be there, but the quality ends up going up because of the culture that they have that drives the increase in quality and trying to level people up just a little bit at a time. We don't have to make them the best shooters in the world, but if we can encourage people or set a standard that's slightly higher than the typical, that's cultural, right? That has to come from the inside out. It's not like we don't need to, maybe in some cases, some of these guys need better instruction, right? They need to get some old blood out and put some new blood in or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, do they need more training or do they need more practice, right? And within that, like, how are we encouraging that? How do we get people to do more of that? We were talking about Wayne and Jesse down at Primal Response. They're down sort of near your neck of the woods. Great dudes. And they put up a post. It was a clip of one of the things that we were talking about here. And we went deep into the comments about, the responsibility but culturally, like, why don't people want to come to trainings more? Why is it so tough to get, even when we do trainings, it's tough to get people there. I think that's a cultural issue. And I think you need to be asking yourself that question. I thought it was a really good question to ask. And And you can't lead a horse. You can't make a horse drink the water, but you can fucking lead them to it and make them feel really thirsty, right? And make them feel compelled to drink it. So I'm really glad you brought that point up, because that's something I've been saying from the outside looking in for a long time, from whether it's leadership, shooting, whatever else. Like there's a cultural thing there that I think gets missed a lot. It gets reduced to, you just need to practice more. All right, man. Like,
what is that? Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. But if it was that simple, like you would see those that just practice more, all the shooters would get better. But that's not how it works, right? That the mindset would change. That's not how it works. It has to be something else. So I think there's something to be said for that. And I think there's probably, like, guys like you could probably be sharing that. Like, what does that mean? So that, some of these other folks that are just not sure, like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, or how to get guys to the range, or how to make them better. It's more about how to build, how to be a leader and influence people, win friends and influence people, as they say.
And I think you said this last night, but a lot of this training has become really incestuous. Like the departments, it's like, one thing I absolutely hate hearing when I go somewhere and teach is like, it's what we've always done. We've always done it that way. It's like, okay, dude, but
without even realize they're saying it. Like, do you realize what you just said?
Why do you guys do that? Well, it's how we've always done it. It's like, well, does it work? Is it repeatable? Is it durable? Like, how does it hold up? When you pressure test this thing, how does it do? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's just how we always did.
We've just never done that. Yeah. We never did that part. Yeah.
Dude, it's kind of a big deal, man. So I think a lot of the culture just in general around training, around methodologies, it's got to change, and you're seeing it with guys like Pronka and Noner and pushing the way that people train, trying to slay some sacred cows that people have been doing for years. And they're not exactly sure why they do it that way, but they've done it for years. So it's like they've tied their ego to doing things a certain way and training a certain way, and it's like the discussion we had about martial arts. Like, some people will tie their entire personality and ego to this way of doing something. And they're really, it's like,
they're just so self-limiting.
Exactly. Like, whether it works or not, like, this is the way that I do these things. It's
so
like,
self-limiting.
It's interesting, man. It feels like a banging your head against a wall sometimes to get people to realize, small things that you've been doing for a long time. Why? Explain to me why. Why do you do it this way? And why don't you do it this way? Or have you been exposed to these ways of doing it? And it's like, no. We teach, small things like, for instance, the slide stop lever on a pistol.
Okay.
I'll still get departments that tell me, oh, you can't use the slide stop lever on the pistol to send the slide forward. So, you go in a slide lock, you need to do your reload. You push the little button that releases the magazine. You put a new magazine in there, but they'll tell you have to reach up and pull the slide to the rear. You can't use that little button. Why? Oh, because, this is a fine motor skill, and this is a gross motor skill. First of all, bullshit. But you just use the same finger to push a button 1 inch apart, and you're going to tell me you can't do it for this? And they go, well, they'll give me this list.
It's just what they heard. They're regurgitating what they heard.
And it's like, hey, man, I get it, but there are better ways to do it that are repeatable and durable. And it's like, if you're not willing to move forward with this, man, what is the point?
Yeah.
It speaks to the entire training methodology. It's like, this is how I learned it. This is what we're sticking to.
Again, why I wanted to have you on the show is because you got so much insight from a different perspective, working with a population that I end up talking to a lot, or is highly involved. We're around firearms quite a bit, so it makes sense. Law enforcement gets mixed up in there, but it's not just there, right? We're talking about the culture as a whole, training as a whole, whether it's firearms or anything else for that matter. Kind of life, how you approach problem solving is like, hey, maybe you try something different this time instead of this definition of insanity. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. What's interesting actually is like, we've been talking about all this stuff where you've been actively kind of doing the thing, you're moving into a different position, man. Like, so you're moving from it's funny because every time I ask you about it, you're like, like the eyebrows go up and because I can see there's a little bit of anxiety there, but not in a bad way. Maybe it's excitement. I mean, again, you're a dude, but you're a dude that's done a lot of things, but the You're transitioning from the instructional space now into sales.
Into sales.
For one of the biggest firearms companies in the world, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the word weight, that's got a lot of weight, man. I imagine there's some pressure there.
There is, man. It's really a different thing for me. And, single dad, and I got my daughter full time most of the time. And just the training schedule was really rough. I mean, I was on the road too much, to be dad as much as I should. And I talked to some of the sales guys and said, hey, man, you know the gun really well. You should think about coming over to sales. It's not what you think. You're not going door to door. The pistol sells itself. Glock is the finest pistol out there. Everybody knows that. Some people are resistant to it, but it really, I mean, the gun sells itself, and it is what it is for a reason. People understand the gun, and it's earned its reputation. So I don't have to sell, I don't have to go around and sell the gun. It's more about interface. And as I'm learning, as of, this is week
yeah,
two,
we're 10 days into this, basically.
So I'm still learning this. And they put in place a really great program for kind of spinning the new guys up. So the old guy's still around. He's taking me on the road with them. He's telling me.
You're neck deep in this right now, yeah.
Sitting me down and saying, this is CRM. Yeah. Or he's like, when you do this in CRM, what the fuck is a CRM? I don't even know what that is, man. So I'm learning all this, but they're really supportive, and they're doing a great job of kind of spinning me up.
I love it.
Glock's got a really great infrastructure on the way that they do sales and stuff. So it's more about interfacing with the customers, with the shops, making sure that they're doing things the right way. They're supporting the customer the way that they should be. And I'm excited, but a little bit nervous, man. It's a different thing than I've ever done.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's just like I was saying, I was introducing you to CC up front. Like in a year, you're probably going to be salesman of the year. Like I'd probably be sending you to like fucking Bahamas or something on some elite performers trip or something like that.
Definitely go to Austria in August, again, which would be nice.
Right. So like, I feel like there'll be new opportunities for you or whatever. And as a student, like I can't imagine this is that hard for you. Like, I'm not saying it's not a challenging thing to do, but I can't imagine it's going to be that hard for you who's been through so much. In the meantime, like I would have asked if people be like, dude, how's this guy going to he's going to hate this, right? He's going to hate going from shooting and being around shooters all the time to never shooting. But that's not actually true, because you still have Outrider training company with John. And so that gives you an opportunity to still keep your finger on the pulse, still be out there. I know you compete. You just competed recently, so you're staying active there. You want to talk about Outrider a little bit? Yeah.
So, first let me say, as a shooter, as the training guys, one of the guys, and the training staff at Glock is phenomenal. Willie's done a great job. He's brought on all the right guys. We've got former Rangers, former unit guys. We've got former cops, but they're all the right guys for the job. They built an incredible culture, and every year we kind of compete. And the bars get set every year. So the culture is phenomenal. And I was really hesitant to separate from that. And fortunately, he's like, dude, the only thing I wanted to do less than go to sales at Glock was to leave Glock, because it's such a great company, man. It really, the way that they treat the consumer, the customer, the organization itself, it's just the best company to work for. They really are phenomenal. So it was going to be hard to stay in training. I got this opportunity, and I'll be just fine. It's gonna be all right.
I'm sure you will. Yeah.
But on the training side, John and I started Outrider Training Group a couple years ago. It was really just kind of to focus. We still have the responsibilities of shooting with Glock. In the training cadre at Glock. So we're not trying to compete with Glock, and probably wouldn't work out well for us. It's not going to work out.
There's plenty of pie, though, man. There's plenty of pie. So
So every once in a while we'll get clients that have a certain request. They want this type of class. We'll be teaching a rifle pistol class up here later this month. And for me, it's great because I get to train, and I get to, teach, do the things I love. It keeps me humble, keeps me honest, because I'm not going to go out there half-cocked and not, and not perform and not shoot. John is a phenomenal shooter. He's a really phenomenal shooter. He's a great student as well. That's one of the things we really had in common. And why, I was the best man at his wedding. He's one of the best friends in the world. But early on, we went to a shooting class together. And at the, I look over, he's got a notebook. I got my notebook. We're filling up pages. And at the end of every class that we go to now, we'll sit down with our notes and bounce it off of each other, download the notes. We learn the same way. We're pretty dedicated to being students and learning. So it's worked out pretty well for us. And on the training side, we get to do what we love and teach the type of people we want to be around. And I'm stoked. I'm really excited for it. So we're going on a couple years now. We've had a couple really good classes, and yeah, man, that's Outrider.
I love it. So, I mean, again, like I said, when I sat down, there were so many things. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack. The dude behind it all, again, I'd heard so many good things. And I guess, at the end of the day, the depth or the breadth and the depth of things that you've done provide you kind of a perspective on things that's much different than anybody I've kind of had sit in that chair before, which is what I was so excited this morning, kind of waking up going, dude, this is going to be fun.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, we're going to be able to peel back some layers here. But I also this is a relationship building thing too. And that's how this happened. It's just from good dudes recommending and talking and hanging out and trusting in and counting on and being able to do that with other good dudes. So, that said, if other people want to know about you as a dude, and your company Outrider and the things that they're doing, how do they find out more? Where should they reach out to contact you? I mean, obviously here's your chance, on the commercial sales side of things, to put out the business card, the audio business card here to get in touch with you, kind of how you handling things from a business perspective, like regionally. Is it just California? Is it Nevada? Is it what? Can you give us the
going anywhere, anywhere where there's a need? And John and I are both very, very poor at doing this. We're not marketing guys. We're not social media guys. We're working on it, but we've got our nose in the shooting game. And, he's competing, I'm competing, we're shooting, we're taking classes. We're trying to get the best information we can. We're working full time for the best company on the planet. So sometimes our social media and our marketing aspect isn't the greatest, but it's easy, man. OutriderTrainingGroup.com. Email info@OutriderTrainingGroup. You can go on the Twitter and the Instagrams. I do a piss poor job of posting on social media.
Yeah, man, it's a whole thing. I mean, running a business, working for a business, doing the business, all that stuff, man, it's brutal. If I didn't have help, there's no way I could do this stuff. Plus, I've said this plenty of times on the show, I have a deep-rooted aversion to social media anyways. So I've just had to figure it out and do the best I can. So it's all a process, man. Yeah. Just like anything else.
Yeah, it's better. Putting together videos. I think we want to show there's a lot of shooting instructors out there. There's some really great guys. You've had some really phenomenal ones.
Ton of them. Yeah.
That I've stolen a lot from, Pronka and Noner and those guys. I'm always constantly, stealing from those guys. I think the perspective we try to bring might be a little bit different. The way that we, the way that we teach, the reasons that we teach. If you see the back of the shirt, it'll say, principle-based, performance-driven. I want to understand the principle on why we shoot this a certain way. And then we're going to pressure test the hell out of it to see if it holds up, if it's durable, if it works in every situation. So that's kind of the way that we go about it. And it's good just being he and I, because we think about things the same way. So we get to pressure test everything. And if it doesn't hold up, we both kind of changed a couple of the way that we teach things.
That's important.
It's important.
Yeah, so it's evolution.
Yeah. It's really an evolution for us. And we get to really focus on teaching things the way we want to teach them, and getting the information out that we really want to get out. So it's been cool, man.
I love that. I love that you have that opportunity on the other side of it. You have the opportunity to get out there and supply this stuff, the product that, from Glock to good, 2A, red-blooded, constitutional right, exercising Americans. I know you're working on the commercial side of things, so that's gun shop owners and FFLs and guys like me, right? That are just trying to get into a good product and do stuff with that. So
on that, before we move off of that, because I think we dove really heavily into the law enforcement side when it comes to training. But I mean, you're training all over, man. You've been putting in some work, huh?
I wish I'd practice more. I get the opportunity to train a lot. And I should be practicing more. There's a little bit of a limitation here. It's funny. Actually, you're saying that. I just got a text message from my buddy Josh, who I actually trained with. We flew out to Georgia and did a distance carbine class with the Pre-Corps and counting coup guys, and we've shot together several times. He just hit me up. I was like, dude, I'm going down to Soledad, which is about
Minnesota.
It's an hour 45 from here, something like that, south. He's going down there in about a week. You want to go down there and get some range time in. And he's invited me out because he does practice. He is dedicated and full-time. He's a full-time healthcare provider and does a bunch of stuff. So but anytime he can get out, he gets out and he always invites me. I've said, dude, I think I can do this, but I got this other stuff because the schedule's been super heavy. My point in saying this is like, I'm going to get out. I think I got to run it through air traffic control with CC. Make sure I don't have any plans that I have forgotten about that she's told me about 16 times, but I'm going to get out and practice. But yeah, my thing is I don't practice enough. Like I don't think I'd probably say that even if I was, but I don't practice enough. But yeah, I consider myself so fortunate and privileged to have the opportunities to go do it. I certainly take advantage of those. I work hard a lot of times to make those things happen. But yeah, it comes in like fits and spats. Like I'll go really hard for a couple months and I'm like, shit, like I got to catch up on some.
It's expensive.
Yeah, there's that, there's logistics, there's all that stuff too. But I love learning just like you. I mean, that's what these podcasts are about, really, for me is the learning experience. So anytime I get myself in front of people that really care about other people and helping them be better at whatever that is, hitting steel at 700, 800 yards or, doing a better job moving and shooting, on a flat range with a pistol or whatever else, and the things they're bringing to the table, I take every opportunity I possibly can to get there. I do not discriminate. I am very intentional and deliberate about who I'll go and spend my time with or whatever. But yeah, man, over the last couple of years, I've had some amazing experiences. Yeah, it's been fun.
What's important, man? I think you kind of, for a new shooter, probably a good framework for them to look into. Because, we talk about law enforcement being the ones to stop a shooting, but reality, what's the average response time for officers nationwide? It's like 8 minutes or something. I know they're trying their ass off. It's not an indictment on law enforcement, but the reality is
it'll never be fast enough.
It's not fast enough. Right. So if you're a good red-blooded gun-toting American, you might be the motherfucker to stop, whatever the shooting is. You might have to step in and put yourself out there to stop it. And if you're carrying a gun, man, same level of responsibility. I mean, you're not committed to it. You're not going to get charged for turning the other way and going. And that's something you have to consider. But at the same time, shit might go sideways. You might be the guy with the gun, and you owe it to yourself and your family and everybody that you protect to know, how to use it.
Make a decision. Yeah, when you make that decision, what do you do? What happens once you've done that? I couldn't agree with you more. That's the thing that compelled me to do this, or to get more into the training, or to really start training properly. I'll even put it that way, and start to learn how to practice. Because that's one thing that I think is the most important thing for me is when I go to one of these things. And I've been to some things that are like experiences. Like I was telling you, like I went out and met with like Don from Green Line Tactical and Sam Houston over at Silent Solutions or whatever, and got to get into a helicopter and shoot from the helicopter. Man, I ain't going to probably ever do that again. Fuck, it was fun. Like,
it's a lot of fun.
But how do I practice that? I'm probably not going to practice that. But there was some other stuff. There was some other stuff that I did learn on the flat range before we went up there. And then the things that I learned were actually from the dudes on the ground. I mentioned Chris Sizlove. There's another guy, Donnie Walker, who's actually coming in next week. I cannot wait to introduce this guy to the audience. He's a super good dude. But my learning experience happened there. And they were teaching me things. We were talking about things that were totally unrelated to the helo and all that other stuff that I could put into practice. Yeah. Right. So anyway, just going back to the being a student and learning how to practice things to get better at them. That's really what I'm looking for now. Like I can go out and get the experience and train. And the reality of it is I probably don't need any more training. What I need to do is fucking practice so that when I go to the training, I can take that training or pick up more from that training, like at the next level. That's the reality of it for me. And that's what I've recognized. Like I'm at peak performance for me until I start putting
in the work,
putting in more work. Like that's just it. And I've accepted that. I know what that is. And I just have to do that. I have to chip away, but I'll never turn down a training experience. Yeah. Especially when I get to hang out with dudes like you or, or whatever, like where we get to go out. Cause I get my training and my learning and my social experience. Yeah, man. It's usually hanging around with good dudes that just, we're into the same things. It's not weird.
That's important, man. This is an important aspect too, because I think a lot of times the training aspect gets just shuffled around in where it should be, like, or the dry fire or the actual shooting gets shuffled. Like what we'll say at our is like, I do my dry fire to, I inform my trainer based off of whatever my deficiency is. So if I go shoot a match and just like, I had a 5th place finish the other day, I'm still mad about, but shooting a red dot pistol, I'm just seeing target. My vision opened up. Instead of aiming at a small point on the target, I saw target and I shot target. So I had a couple misses that I threw really early on. Well, for the next couple of weeks, my dry fire is going to be about vision, tightening up my vision. And then I'll go back to a competition, or I'll go to a training course, or I'll do a timed event, and then I'll validate the work that I put in that way. So same thing, if I go take a training course, I'm not going to learn how to shoot in a 2-day training course. I'm learning things that I can make concrete through training for the next, couple weeks. And then I can take it out and compete, or I can take it out to another class and validate that I've learned that skill set and have an understanding of it. So really the way that people learn, or the way that people think about training, is flawed, right? It's like,
agreed.
Yeah, you go there to learn these things, okay? To get introduced to these things, take your notes. You're not going to remember this shit after a whole day of shooting, dude. It's out, it's gone. Take your notes, take it home, and chew the notes up and realize, okay, what did I need to take from this drill specifically? What did I need to take from this evolution in the shooting? Use that to inform your training until you go to the next training event or competition. And then training, or like qualifications for law enforcement. This should be validating the work that I've done previously. It's not a, once a year I break the gun out to do this qualification, and that means I'm still ready for a fight. It's like, well, no, anytime I do shoot the standards for Glock, or shoot, competition, it's like, this is telling me where my deficiencies are. And now I'm going to program my training just like you would in bodybuilding. Appropriately to develop that skill set, so that the next time I do it, I can say, yeah, hey, I got better at shooting multiple targets because I put the work in my vision.
That's so the parallel you just made there against like exercise and shooting. It's the same. It is the same. And so if you start to understand like adult learning behavior and human behavior at that level, but how people learn, what the things they need to do in order to learn, the process, or the process in which that happens. Yeah, I think you said it. I don't know if you said it out right there, but they're cutting out the pieces. They're cutting out the pieces. It's I got this information, and now I'm good to go apply it, and I'm going to be fine. I'm proficient now. Understand that, okay, maybe I'm not hitting maybe my group is not as small as I'd like it to be, but I'm good. Like I got it. I understand the information. What's next? No, dude.
You skipped all the actual work.
All the stuff.
All the work.
It's like saying like, okay, well, that guy told me I could deadlift 500 pounds. Like, so, and I can deadlift, right? Like I can't deadlift 500 pounds, but I can deadlift like 300. So because he told me the things that I would need to do in order to be able to do that. And I listened and I took notes or whatever, but then I didn't do any of it. And then I go in like, and I put 500 fucking pounds on the bar. What the fuck do you think's going to happen?
It's really heavy, man.
Yeah. Like you might get the thing to move a little bit, but you didn't lift 500 pounds. Exactly. And what did you set yourself up for in terms of poor movement patterns, potentially setting yourself up for an injury? And by the way, lying to yourself and just pretending that was going to happen. That's not what gets you there. And the other part of this is, and I think this is the thing, this is what I understood very early on, which is why I didn't marry myself and never have married myself to any one thing, is that the difference between, again, like the exercise thing, and you compare it to shooting, like the difference between getting, say, from like your deadlift to from 300 pounds to 350 pounds, right? Or let's call it 300 pounds to 400 pounds, which is, that's a considerable amount of weight. The difference that it's going to take in terms of how you apply the practice or the quote unquote training, I'm going to say practice and training being the same thing, right? I'm going to practice this skill. I'm going to practice this methodology. The difference from 300 to 400 is going to be way fucking different than it is from 600 to 650.
Yeah.
The details that go into that and the nuance that goes into that, you're going to have to have a deep level of understanding, patience, consistency, and your ability to understand what and when to apply certain things. It's much different between those two. So my point of that with the shooting is people come in and very quickly they can get to, a bill drill, which is kind of near, where somebody's doing it really fast. I'm not even going to get into like what's fast and what isn't fast. But they recognize, okay, so because they practice some skill now, they understand, okay, so now they're it's like exercise. Like as a newbie, you're going to make those advancements generally pretty quickly, but they will slow down. You will reach the end limit of that. And people don't generally spend long enough in it. They don't commit them enough time to it. And that's what I was saying before. Like I have not committed the appropriate amount of time to say anything about my level of shooting, right? Because I know it could be way fucking better. And the only thing that's between me and doing that has nothing to do with how much training I've had up to this point. It's how much practice I put into it, right? And so, again, people want to talk about things that they probably aren't very familiar with. I will not do that. I would never go, well, they should be doing this more and whatever. In theory, maybe, but look, you just haven't learned how to practice and do the training in order to get to this thing yet. And more importantly, you haven't applied it. Yeah. So, I think
it's interesting. I think what's different about this, and it's the same in martial arts, I learned how to do a triangle choke. And now, in 6 months, I should be able to do a triangle choke. Well, no, you don't have any context. You don't understand how to do it or how to apply it. But it's like for shooting, any of the martial stuff, fighting, shooting, lifting weights, as men, we tend to really tie our ego to it. Like, I could do that. I could shoot like John Wick. I could do this. I could do that. Like I should be able to do those things because I'm a man and those are things that men do, right? And it's like, well, kind of. I mean, you can do it, but can you, to do it well, you really have to separate from your ego and put in the work and know that you're not good at it yet until you put in the work until you are good at it. And the thing, like, everybody can drop down and go, I saw, when I was a kid, Sylvester Stallone, how did he look like that? Well, he exercised a lot. So I know how to do push-ups. So I dropped down and do 20 push-ups. And I'm like, man, 20 push-ups was hard. I need to get to where I'm doing 100 push-ups. And it's like, well, dude, if you don't do more push-ups, you're stuck at 20 push-ups, dude. And that's an easy thing to validate, to drop down and do push-ups or to, try to pick up a barbell and go, fuck, that's really heavy still. But most people will never be able to validate, how they punch in a bar until they're in a bar fight, or, how well they shoot unless they're on the range or they're shooting in it.
I think that's the tough part about the shooting thing, right? Is that part of it, is the validation, which also drives some interesting stuff. Again, going back to Chris Sizlove, is like people, they get so much and they have put in practice and they have put in work, and now they want to validate it differently than just standing. Again, I'll go back to the Bill drill. Like, I did all this work. Here was my time when I started and it was forever. And now I've cut that time in half and I'm accurate, and I'm hitting it all. Like, what else can I do with this? Like it's kind of like fitness. How am I defining my success here? And what else can I do with this? So they're looking for things to do this in application. Like, and this is where the CQB thing got wild. Like, it's like, well, okay, so if I can do this here on statically on the range, with my firearm and this target at this yard, let's do something a little bit more exciting. Let's see if something actually happened where I could move, I needed to move around, or I live in a house, right? Like maybe this is something I need to know how to do. They want to validate it. And so you see all these people starting to drift over there. Let me see if I can take this into that. And obviously there's an opportunity for people to make money. It gets wildly out of control. It gets stupid. But the point of that is people want to, they get to a point where they want to expand on whatever it is that they have. And I appreciate that. But if you haven't been taught, here's all the other steps that come in between, right? Before you start doing this, I'm not saying don't go do the CQB class. I'm not fucking saying, I've done that. Like, I did that. What I learned real quick was like, oh shit. Yeah. I'm a shitty fucking shooter. That's what I learned there. Like, I thought I was okay. Man, I fucking suck. Because I'm trying to process too many things. I hadn't mastered, my vision. I hadn't mastered movement on a flat range. How the fuck am I going to do that in a shoot house, kind of thing? Like, it didn't make a lot of sense. It didn't make sense to me really going in. It was very apparent to me right away. But again, the people get very disenfranchised with that process. And that is the thing that I want to think like more guys like you were talking about. And you mentioned a couple of guys that are doing that more. I think that message got lost, and now it's kind of new. It's sort of like exercise or the fitness industry was. It's starting to penetrate.
Yeah.
It's starting to penetrate, but still people want to be really angry about the whole thing. So I try not to get myself involved in that. But
yeah. Again, it's their ego is tied to it, you know?
Yep. So that was the whole point.
That's the whole point is that their ego is tied to it. And it's like, well, man, you know, I think you're right. I think people don't know the way that they learn is part of the problem too. Like they haven't spent time being a student and mastering the way that they learn so they can go through an entire course and then retain none of it.
Yeah, or finish what you started. I mean, I think, maybe agree or disagree is maybe a cliche term, but I think like what I've heard is because you have one of these, when you earn that BJJ black belt, what you realize is your journey has just begun, right? Yeah, you realize your journey has just begun. Yeah. And most that I've come across that have reached that level, you know, of proficiency are also those dudes that are real quiet. They're just kind of taking it all in and what can I learn from this situation? And more importantly, how can I help somebody else learn from the situation? Not by telling them, but by showing them, giving their experience, which is, I think when you look at some of maybe these, what some might consider crusty, you know, older, you know, more seasoned and grizzled instructors, is that's the thing that they're kind of doing, or actually kind of backing off from the telling you what you should do. And it's like, look, man, I'm not going to change my tune. I can't say it any differently than I've been saying it. And I'm not going to change it because it doesn't need to be changed. Yeah. It's how are you receiving it? And how are you learning this? And maybe I could do a better job of delivering it based on your learning style.
Yeah.
But also maybe I'm not your flavor and you should be hearing this from somewhere else. But the stuff doesn't change. The information is the same.
The information's the same. Yeah. And as an instructor, your responsibility is to make sure you have a lot of tools to deliver it to different learning styles. But man,
that's the evolution right now, I think.
It is.
In the industry is people understanding how people learn and how to penetrate those certain market segments or whatever they are. And as long as there's that kind of discovery process going on, you're going to see all kinds of shit, right? Yeah. You're going to see and hear all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I get frustrated by some of it sometimes too, but, you know, getting emotional, tying your ego to it. Well, this sucks and I'm better and this is why. Like, I think there's some value in understanding that this guy is penetrating this market. Maybe we look at that a little bit and go, what is he saying and how is he saying it that he's being, quote unquote, air quotes here, successful, you know, in that sense. So, and don't just boil it all down to, well, it's sexy and that's why people are buying it. Yes, sexy sells.
It's easy to say that.
Yeah,
it's easy to say
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, I don't think it's, you know, oh, it's just a gimmick. Okay. All right, like I get where you're coming from on that, but let's for just a second, let's assume that not everybody's an idiot, right? And that they just fall for gimmicks. There's something to this, and we should examine this a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of your other guests was talking about like a vehicle CQB course and like the value, the perceived value in it, and the way that people kind of flock to it. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because there's people are getting shot in cars, you know.
They want to know about
They want to know about it. But what they, you know, they got a fire hose to the face and information. And it was like, okay, this is, you know, well articulated information. This must be important. And reality is like what Nona says, like, dude, no, getting shot in a car sucks. You know, getting shot in a vehicle sucks. I've been there. You're trying to get through the whole thing. You don't want to sit in the driver's seat and duke it out, that type. It's like, dude, no, get the fuck out of there if you can. And if not, you have to be familiar enough with like, you know, getting out of the vehicle, where you should go. And that stuff is easy. Shooting around a car is just
shooting around a car.
Yeah. It's cover and conceal, you know, whatever. But that was some of that stuff was marketed really, really well with a lot of well articulated information. And guys that had, you know, lived it a lot were like, well, no, all that shit is stupid. But
yeah, but for the person that hasn't, that has a curiosity, right? And again, the curiosity killed a cat, right? Kind of thing. You could say that. But again, okay, so they're curious. Why are they curious? Like, okay, there's marketing, but what does that mean? Like, what is it? And again, there's a connection to it, I think, going back to like my thing with the CQB and the thing that I was articulating there. I was like, look, okay, so I've been out here on the range a lot, man. Like, what else is there to do?
Yeah, do it from the front seat.
Yeah, I want to have fun, right? I want to, you know, but I also want to like I drive a car, right? I go to the gas station. where I just, same scenario that I just watched this person get blasted from, the pump over or whatever else. Like maybe I should know this stuff. Like what's available to me or what should I need to know? And if this is what's being pushed to me, right? Again, that's partly your responsibility to seek out why this stuff is being pushed to you or where it's coming from, whatever. But it's being pushed to me, like, and that's what's available. That's what's available. And if I don't know it, I don't know. So I say all that to say is the people are curious, and if they've been shooting for a few years now, they're going to want different stuff. And it's not because they're, what's the word I'm looking for? LARPing, or whatever else. Maybe a little bit of it is. I don't fucking know. Like that. That's not something I was ever interested in. I don't want to be a Navy SEAL. Like I never wanted to be. I don't want to have the hair for it. I don't want to be now. Right. Like all this stuff, like, or whatever, special operator, this guy, that's that never appealed to me anyway. But I do think that, if you've been in it long enough, like at some point going to the range and doing the drills, like you want to test yourself, you want to know what else is out there. And so I see other people kind of bagging on, like these are instructors that are bagging on other instructors for maybe trying something different. And it's like, well, they're running out of gas. And so they're trying to do something way different. And, they're getting outside their lane. Well, is it that they're running out of gas, or is it that the consumer is running out of gas and the instructor is recognizing that? And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do to enter into maybe a discipline that you don't have a lot of experience with as an instructor or whatever else, because you see an opportunity. But there's also like this in between, that I think is important for people to kind of explore right now and be maybe a little bit more patient. And maybe patient isn't the right way, but just be a little bit more observant as to why it's happening. Who's driving this, right? Is it the consumer that's driving this, or is it the instructor that's driving it?
It's both. It's definitely both.
I agree with you 100%.
And when you've been shooting a build drill and you're trying to get to a sub-second build drill or sub 2 second build drill, and it's like, oh man, the progress sucks. Going, like you said, going from a 3 second to 2 seconds, kind of hard. Getting into 1.5, that's difficult. Really fucking hard.
Right.
It's like, man, I've been doing this really hard and it's kind of boring. So now I want to do it inside of a house. And it's like, shooting a build drill in a house is shooting a build drill.
Right.
You're in a house. You're in a house. There's not a whole lot that changes to it, but it's fun and it's sexy, and there's definitely a place for it. I mean, I've seen instructors who kind of maybe played it the right way for the civilian market, where guy's laying in bed and he gets out of bed and responds to an intruder in a house type. It's moving through a house and shooting.
Yeah, this could be I think it's a very broad topic, but I think it can be boiled down to a few things, and that is, again, if people want to explore the different things that they hear or see outside of what happens on the range and what happens with your dry fire, right? And so giving them that experience, but also being able to bridge the gap between the experience and the actual instruction, and teaching people what's important here. Like, okay, yes, this is an experience. This is likely not a high frequency type of scenario, but in the scenarios that do happen similar to this, here's the 3 most important parts. And here's what you can do, right, to make sure, that, because you're not going to be able to run through shoot houses all the time and practice this, and we can't create every scenario. And I hate that, when people are just like, oh, well, what ifs. Doing a better job at presenting, maybe problem solving based on this concept. And, I know concepts are tough to sell. It's more that people want to see like the specific, what's the answer, versus like the understanding of the concept. But, without belaboring the point, I think there's a lot of room right now for the industry to re-examine itself on both the product side, but I'm talking specifically on the training or instruction side here, to cater to a customer who has fucking put in the work, right? And do something that's a little bit more exclusive in a sense. Like, you need to qualify to get into this thing. We're not just taking every Joe Blow who just wants the experience. Like, we only want people that have really put in work. How do you qualify that? Well, that's a tough one too.
It is a hard one.
But I think it's possible. And I think if maybe some of these guys spent a little bit more time doing that, you would see a really good result. But it's going to take some tripping and falling and fucking it up. And people are going to try to enter into that space and either run interference or, just get themselves over their head and the things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And, that's going to create controversy, and it's going to create maybe some quote unquote bad things. And even you could equate bad to dangerous, if you're teaching people things that could potentially get them hurt or killed or kill somebody else or hurt somebody else or whatever. I get all that. But I still think
there's room for it.
There's definitely room for this. Yeah.
It's interesting because like, to get good at CQB, like, you're not going to start in a shoot house. Like, I've done a lot of, like, they're going to lay out tape on the ground or chalk,
right.
And it's not sexy, but it's like, that's the work you have to do to get good at,
Yeah, you're not going to be able to sell that very well.
It doesn't sell well.
It doesn't sell well. So I get the skipping the steps.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a conundrum, but I get that too. And it's like, man, I want to go, get in the house. I want to do some work, And I fortunately have a buddy in Burbank with a shoot house that I get to use every once in a while. But
nice.
Like, it's hard, for me to get into a class. With certain classes, it would be hard because, I've done some CQB, but why do you need it? You're not active. You're not doing this type of thing. So I definitely see both sides of that. I like shooting in a fucking house. It's fun, man.
Yeah. Who doesn't, man? Like I said, I've had my experiences and it's fun. It's a different stimulus. It's a brain game. I love the chess match. And I like being the white belt, and learning new stuff and drinking from the fire hose on occasion.
Yeah.
But I think I have a healthy sense of when I am and drinking from a fire hose and understanding like, this is just, there's so much here. I'm not leaving here. I've never done that. I've never left any of these experiences going, oh, I'm good.
Yeah. Like,
I had my 2 lessons. It's like fucking 2 free personal training sessions they give you when you buy your membership over at 24 Hour Fitness. Like, they want you to the customer wants to think they're going to get everything they need so they can go out there and, now achieve the dream of being fit. And certainly the person selling it to you is going to say all the right things to make sure that, you think that too. And then they're going to hit you after you spent $29, plus a $40 initiation fee. They're going to hit you with a $2,000 training package because they're going to quickly show you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
You don't know what you're doing.
Right?
You got a long ways to go.
And you might need help. So
I think learning in life is just that in a cycle. Like with me, with shooting, with jiu-jitsu, with everything, it's like achieve a certain level of proficiency, have a really good match or a really good, shoot at a course and have a really good one. And then realizing that I still suck at this, and this. Go have a really good match in jiu-jitsu, roll with some really good guys. And then afterwards I roll with somebody that's like, hey, you suck.
Yeah, my buddy Joe Dawson would say, just go fucking shoot your guns.
Yeah.
Like, go dent some primers and figure some stuff out, because you do that enough, you're going to realize real fast, but you got to do it enough.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do enough. It's like exercise, or anything else.
Yeah.
Like,
there's always another plane to jump up to.
Yeah, you got it. Shit, man. This has been so much fun. I could talk to you for hours.
I was thinking, man, we should probably do another one and take a break.
One of these days, we'll have to reserve the right to have you back in, maybe when you're
Anytime,
back up.
man.
I know you're coming back at the end of the month or towards the end of the month here, maybe able to jump into a session or a class with you.
Yeah, man. Be awesome.
And check you guys out. I would love to. It was really, it's been a good time. It's good meeting you. I've been educated in a few different ways through here, which I really appreciate. I know it will. Some of the value that you've been able to provide me will certainly reach some other people. I hope this does in a different way. There were some parts of this conversation. There's obviously your personal story, which has some real value, I think, in kind of lessons in life, but kind of some of the things we talked about conceptually, what you're seeing as a civilian who teaches law enforcement, who works for a very large corporation, who also has his own business as an entrepreneur, who's been punched in the face a few times for real, who's maybe been, you've been shot at for real. Like, these are all things that add into the experience and the knowledge that then gets projected as you've done so well today with the wisdom. And I think that'll reach people. So I think that's awesome. And that's why we had the show. And that's why I wanted to have you on. So if there was any question in your mind, and I know there was about coming onto the show, I think my goals were achieved today. And I hope you had a good time, man.
I did, man. I made all that up, by the way.
It's all bullshit.
None of that was true, man. All bullshit.
I love that. It's a great place to sign off, man. Thanks again, Jay. It's great having you, man. I hope I fucking see you real soon.
Likewise, brother.
All right,
Appreciate you, man.
Take care.